Before things get going too far, I am going to record this for those who would like to listen back later and review all of the great content we have today. Good morning, everyone. I hope everyone is doing well. My name is Erica Hayes, and I'm a development director representing the Washington, Alaska chapter of the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation. And we are so excited about this educational day virtually. A little bit of background on this special day. We have gotten the chance to host this event now. This is our third year. And this event really grew out of the pandemic when we all couldn't gather together in person and still really wanted to find ways to connect, ways to receive updates on the latest and greatest with the foundation, with the world of cystic fibrosis, with research, etc. So this event grew out of that need and then has continued really because of you all and the incredible response we have gotten to this event year over year. People have been so excited for the chance to tune in from their homes and not have to go anywhere, but can listen and learn collectively. And for those of you who have just joined, are requesting if you'd like to pop in the chat who you are and where you're tuning in from, a little about, guess why you're part of this call. So kind of your role is connected to the foundation, and we'll be able to see this wonderful group of folks who are participating today. A couple of little reminders. I know we've been Zooming for a bit now, but it's always helpful, I know, to have friendly reminders when we're on these types of calls. But you're welcome to have your camera on or off. You're welcome to turn it on and off as things go on. No pressure. This is a casual environment, so have a coffee, have a snack, do whatever you need to do. We're so glad you guys are tuning in with us. This afternoon, or this morning, I should say, we have two ways you can communicate with us. So there is a chat feature. So if you're on your Zoom screen at the bottom, you'll see a chat icon and box. That is a great place to say hello to one another, to connect. You can use that to comment if you were really enthused about a particular topic or a piece of information that resonated with you. Additionally, we have the Q&A feature. So what's amazing today is this incredible panel of speakers we have joining us. You get the chance to ask them questions in real time. So the Q&A feature gives you the chance to type in a question that you have for a speaker. Our goal is to have people tune in and during each session be able to ask questions. That allows our speakers to be able to answer things in real time. So please feel free to pop any questions in the Q&A. If you put them in the chat, we'll try to catch them, but the Q&A just helps us really distinguish questions from comments and keeps it all going. So that's really helpful. Just because we have a large audience today, we have, oh my goodness, over 40 people just tuning in so far, which is amazing. And I know a lot of you have a couple of you in the room, so it's even more than that. When you're not sharing, please just keep yourself on mute. It helps so we can hear our speakers really clearly. If you do want to come off mute to ask a question, that's amazing when speakers have finished and we're asking for those types of questions. So please feel free to use that feature as well to come off mute and say your question aloud. You don't just have to type it in the chat. But while we're all listening and learning, just to keep yourself muted, it helps everyone be able to hear very clearly. We, like I said, are so excited. We have incredible representation of speakers today. For the first year ever, this event has extended beyond just our Washington, Alaska community, but to our entire area, which represents Oregon, it represents Northern California, Washington and Alaska, and our Utah, Idaho friends are part of this community as well. So a really large range of folks tuning in, which is fabulous. If at any point you have a question just for Christy or myself, in that chat box, you can toggle and select Christy McAllister or Erica Hayes. We can answer questions if you have something really specific about the foundation or something that just pertains personally. So you can reach out to us. And if you, as you're hearing things, you're maybe new to this community and not yet involved, we hope that you'll follow up later and reach out to your local staff person. We'll put contact info and stuff in there as well. So with that, we are thrilled for today. We're so excited about this virtual community CF Education Day. I have the pleasure of emceeing this really fun event, which is great, but I am more excited and just really humbled to get to turn it over to our incredible speakers who are Amazing. We're so lucky to get to hear from these incredible folks. Quick on the screen, you'll see our full agenda for today, which includes at the very end an optional community meet and greet. So if folks do have time to stick around, you can say hello, introduce yourself, no pressure, of course. And other than that, we are going to jump right in to start today. I get to invite the incredible Dr. Jared Weinstock. He is joining us all the way from Alaska. Dr. Weinstock is director of the Cystic Fibrosis Clinic at Providence, Alaska Medical Center. And today he is joining us to speak on cystic fibrosis treatment landscape, the present and future. So thank you so much, Dr. Weinstock, for being with us today. We are so honored to have you here, staying warm inside, not out in the negative temperatures of Alaska. And with that, please go right ahead.
Thank you so much, Erica, and good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you all are. It's really a pleasure to be here. I'm going to share my screen before we kick off here. And we should all be able to see this. So again, yes, it is a pleasure to be here. This is my third virtual Family Day event here with the chapter, and I really do thank the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation for inviting me to speak and really entertain you all with all of this information and exciting events that, really have been tremendous to see on behalf of cystic fibrosis. So yes, today we have a lot to talk about, and I know I'm trying to really cram all of this in maybe into about 20, 25 minutes so we can have some time for questions. So let's get started. Again, we will be talking about essentially the treatment landscape as it stands today, and also some of the exciting things to come in the future. So really the big focus as the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation lays out is really this path to a cure. So there are many routes with one mission, and that one mission is essentially to find that cure. So we know that there's this ambitious research agenda, and that agenda, the primary focus is really to accelerate the treatments and also the drug development for the underlying cause of cystic fibrosis. So how do we go about this? What are the three core strategies? Well, you'll see here in words, and then the next couple slides will be in a visual aid. Number one of the strategies to really help improve the treatment of cystic fibrosis is repairing that broken CFTR protein. And that's essentially with the development and the availability of the CFTR modulator therapies that are available today. Number two, restoring that CFTR protein when none exists. And this is a big focus that I'm going to be spending some time talking about today in terms of people with cystic fibrosis who are not eligible potentially for the CFTR modulator therapies. And again, maybe have some of these rarer mutations or nonsense mutations as they're called. And again, a lot of work is being poured into research in terms of finding a therapy or therapies for people with these types of mutations. And thirdly, fixing or replacing the underlying genetic mutation to address the root cause of CF. And again, this is a big, big strategy right now in terms of finding and creating a really exciting gene therapy that could potentially deliver that cure for CF. So each of these strategies, again, requires a particular set of tools and knowledge. And again, the CF Foundation has really brought together researchers and industry leaders from a range of different disciplines to help drive the progress toward this goal. This is a roadmap that's on the CF Foundation website, and I think it's a really nice way of putting together a visual aid of what I just described on the previous slide. So essentially at the top of the roadmap, we're starting here with a mutated CFTR gene. Remember, this is the problem why CF exists to begin with. The gene is altered, it's not normal. So how do we go about trying to fix this? Well, again, we can see on the left here, one of the strategies is to repair that CFTR protein that's either not functioning or in the wrong place or both. Now, with the treatments for this, like the modulator therapies, people with the disease will still have CF. However, the hope is that we can optimize and make things a lot better compared to not having these therapies on hand. Number two, again, is restoring that CFTR protein production when no protein is being made at all. But again, even with these therapies, people with the disease will still have CF. And thirdly, one of the primary or big long-term focuses here is to fix or replace the CFTR gene. And with this, people with the disease will no longer have CF. So again, the first strategy, again, just putting it visually here and repairing that CFTR protein would involve the CFTR modulators. And we know that more and better modulators are being developed as we discover that they're responding or the mutations are responding to these therapies. So this is helping a lot of patients in terms of trying to repair or, again, ensure that the effective protein is functioning in the right place in the cell. For patients, again, or people with CF with, again, these nonsense or rare mutations, these are 3 of the treatments that we will be talking about briefly, and I know some of the other speakers will also delve into some of the gene therapies as well. But these are some of the different aspects that can help people with cystic fibrosis who do not respond or are not eligible maybe to CFTR modulators, help them, again, with a treatment that could help with their symptoms and underlying disease process. And then finally, again, the gene therapy aspect in terms of either gene editing, which again, we are correcting the malfunctioning CFTR gene by fixing that dysfunctional DNA, or using something like gene transfer, whereby we're essentially replacing the malfunctioning CFTR gene by inserting a functional copy of the gene itself. And again, this would create, or at least lead to, people no longer having cystic fibrosis. So with all that being said, it sounds like, okay, well, these are reasonable strategies, and it sometimes sounds easier said than done. But what are the challenges here? So we see here that in terms of delivering DNA or any kind of genetic therapy, 3 major hurdles need to be factored into this. So number 1, the duration. So if we give somebody a gene therapy, how long is it going to last? I mean, our hope would be that this is, especially if we're talking about a cure, that this would be a lifetime fix. So that's one aspect that is a challenge, because potentially these newer gene therapies that are being developed, may not have the duration that we would expect. So that's one challenge. The delivery route. How are we going to deliver the normal gene to people with cystic fibrosis? Is it going to be inhaled? Are we going to deliver it through an IV? Is it going to be an oral medication? This is an issue too, or a challenge at least, in terms of finding the perfect gene therapy or DNA therapy for people with CF. And then vehicle, meaning, again, yes, now we talk about the delivery route in terms of administering the therapy, but how do we package the genetic therapy so that it can be delivered appropriately to the cell? So again, these are all of the hurdles that are being looked at from a research standpoint. Again, targeting the correct cell. So if we're delivering genetic material, we want to make sure that it's going to the cells that will continue to replicate and produce the normal protein. And then we need to start targeting specific organs beyond the lungs. The lungs tend to be our primary focus, but remember, cystic fibrosis does affect many other organ systems beyond the lungs, and our hope would be that these newer genetic therapies can have a profound positive impact on not just the lungs, but other organ systems. So again, it's a long road, but the fight does continue. So where are we right now? Well, of course, we must touch upon the CFTR modulators. As we know, these are the mainstay of treatment right now. And again, remember, they are designed to correct that malfunctioning protein made by the CFTR gene. Again, they are effective only in people with specific mutations, and you want to remember how they're working. So again, the CFTR protein is regulating the flow of water and chloride in and out of cells that are lining the lungs and other organs. So in developing these modulator therapies, the goal here is to correct the CFTR protein in some manner and also potentiate or boost its function in the place where it should be working. So, of course, here are our modulator therapies that are available. We, of course, know Trikafta has been out now for a little over 4 years and has made major improvements in patients' lives for those who qualify. And it's important to keep in mind that more potential CFTR modulators are in development to address the underlying cause of people with CF with other mutations. So Trikafta, again, the latest modulator therapy about 4 years ago now, it's a triple therapy. So it's combining what we know as correctors and a potentiator. So again, the corrector is helping to fix the flaw or the defect in that CFTR protein so that it can form the right shape and also help go to the cell surface where it's supposed to be working. And also has that potentiator whereby, again, it's helping to keep that chloride channel open so that chloride can flow through appropriately. So the combination of the three drugs in Trikafta has helped the CFTR protein perform much, much better than the other modulators that have been on the market prior to Trikafta, and has even opened the door for treatment to an even greater number of people with cystic fibrosis. And as you may or may not know, as of around April of last year, Trikafta is now approved for people with CF down to the ages of 2 years and older who have at least one copy of the F508 deletion mutation or at least one copy of 177 specified mutations. I love the drug pipeline that's available on the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation's website. I think it does a great job in highlighting where we are right now and what's to come. So let's delve into a couple different categories here to see exactly, again, what kind of progress is being made in this area. So remember, one of the key strategies here is to restore the CFTR protein. We talked about the modulator therapies that are already available on the market, but you can see here a couple other different options or things that are in trials right now that, again, are along the same lines of restoring that CFTR protein, but of course have not been approved yet and are still in trials. So we will talk about a bit of these on the next slides and again in some of the other lectures to follow. But just know that we're not done in this area in terms of restoring that CFTR protein. There are several other different therapies currently in development. I want to spend some time, again, this is a very, very important focus on behalf of the CF Foundation in terms of trying to find treatment for these rare and nonsense mutations. Remember, about 10% of people with CF in the United States have 2 rare mutations, and of those, about 3% have mutations that may respond to CFTR modulators that correct the protein. So there's a type of lab testing that the foundation supports called theratyping. And the point of this is to identify mutations that may respond to the currently approved CFTR modulators. So even though we have this running list of mutations that, again, allow people to become eligible for Trikafta, there is this type of lab testing that is supported, known as theratyping, to look and see, well, maybe this other mutation that somebody has, even though it is rarer, maybe it will respond to something like Trikafta. So this is something that's ongoing and being supported right now by the foundation. Unfortunately, around 7% of people with CF have a combination of 2 nonsense and rare mutations that do not produce any CFTR protein. So in this case, they would not be able to benefit from CFTR modulators, and we need to find different therapies to fix the underlying root of the disease. So when we think of nonsense mutations, you want to think of these as, let's say you're looking at a recipe and you're following each of the pages and there's a page missing. Well, now that's going to cause your recipe to be all messed up. And that's essentially what a nonsense mutation is doing. It's causing the production of that CFTR protein to stop prematurely. And it's leading to a shortened, non-functional protein that the cell recognizes as defective and then destroys. So we have no CFTR protein being made whatsoever. So tremendous amount of work is being done to look for compounds or agents that could allow the protein-making machinery of the cell to skip over that premature stop signal and continue to make the CFTR protein. These agents are referred to as read-through agents, meaning they could read through the premature stop signal and potentially allow for that CFTR protein to be made in patients with nonsense mutations. For instance, in January 2021, the CF Foundation awarded up to $2 million to Eloxx Pharmaceuticals to support the clinical program of this potential therapeutic known as ELX-02. And this is one of these potential read-through agents to help treat people with CF who have nonsense mutations. Again, it's very early still in trials, but it is actively moving through. And our hope is that this would, again, provide some treatment to people with nonsense mutations. Another problem with nonsense mutations, in addition to that premature stop signal, is that unfortunately, it shortens the amount of time that the genetic material lasts in the cell, meaning it's decreasing the amount of protein that can be made, and this is not good. So there are other ways that are, again, being investigated to help stabilize that genetic material so that it does not break down as fast and can be translated into that CFTR protein. So again, just to highlight, there's a nonprofit organization that is working with the University of Alabama at Birmingham and the CF Foundation to, again, look for some of these read-through agents and stabilizers of the mRNA material that, again, can help prevent the degradation or breakdown of the protein before it's even made. Another company known as Icagen is also undergoing or going through a multi-year drug discovery program to also identify some of these read-through compounds or agents in its library that could, again, look promising for people with these types of mutations. And then, of course, when we look at gene therapy or RNA therapy, this could also be another potential treatment for people with nonsense mutations. And this could actually benefit everyone with CF, regardless of their mutation, like we talked about earlier. So the CF Foundation is pursuing right now 2 different RNA therapy approaches. One approach is to deliver the normal CFTR genetic material, or mRNA, to cells that need to make the protein. The second approach would involve something known as transfer RNA, or tRNA, and this is a key component in cells' ability to translate DNA into a protein. So again, just as an example, there is a company that's supported by the foundation right now that's exploring delivery of something like this transfer RNA. Essentially, it's a suppressor that would allow the cell to read through that premature stop signal in people with nonsense mutations so that they can make this full-length CFTR protein and, again, hopefully go on to have significant improvement in their overall disease status. Finally, in this area, antisense oligonucleotide therapy. It's a mouthful, but ASO, this is a big, big area that's also being explored to correct effects of what are known as splicing mutations. So splicing mutations, as you can see right here, disrupt the production of messenger RNA. Well, what is messenger RNA? Well, we all know what DNA is. That's our genetic material. When this is going through the process of forming a protein, the DNA needs to be transcribed into mRNA. The mRNA then goes on through another process to be translated into the protein, such as CFTR, or essentially, again, what needs to be made in order to help people with CF function appropriately. So with splicing mutations, the production of mRNA is disrupted. And again, we know mRNA is necessary to make that CFTR protein. So these ASOs are being explored to help correct these splicing mutations. And the way they work are essentially they're small pieces of DNA or RNA that bind to that RNA molecule and correct the instructions that are abnormal. And by using these small pieces of genetic material, the full-length CFTR protein can be made. Just to put this into perspective, this type of concept has already been utilized, and there are available treatments in other disease processes outside of cystic fibrosis, like spinal muscular atrophy and also other genetic diseases. So this type of concept really, really may be a true potential in the area of CF. Again, 2 other strategies to help restore the CFTR activity in people with nonsense or rare mutations would be something like gene editing, whereby we're using the cell's own DNA repair system to correct the mutation in the DNA, and then gene therapy itself, which would supply normal CFTR DNA to cells. So this is all very, very promising. Again, nothing short-term right now, but this will be many, many years before this technology can be applied to CF. But just know it's actively being looked at. I'm not spending much time on this because we have another speaker who will delve into the therapeutic trial landscape here. But from a genetic therapy perspective, this is the running list of all the different therapies that are very early on in development right now. Remember, when it comes to research, all of these therapies need to go through all of these different phases in order to be eventually delivered to patients once they're approved. So you can see from a genetic therapy perspective here, there's a running list of different therapies. The first couple, again, on the side here, if you're reading, are forms of inhaled gene therapies, which seem to be the primary focus right now. But again, we'll get into more details of that later on in this session. We know airway clearance is a big focus for people with CF. And, we have, of course, pulmozyme, hypertonic saline, and inhaled mannitol available. Just wanted to point out that the job is not done here. There is another compound being looked at very early on in research right now that would help to, again, improve mucus clearance and also increase the amount of fluid within the airways. So just something to keep in mind, that it's not just the restoring the CFTR activity and the gene therapy, but a lot of these other areas that are very important to maintaining good health with cystic fibrosis, there are other therapies being looked at. We know from an anti-inflammatory standpoint that especially people with things like bronchiectasis or progression of disease, that inflammation is at a much higher level with these patients. So just know that there are some other compounds or therapies being looked at from an anti-inflammatory perspective here that would, again, help to decrease the inflammation in some of these patients or people with CF that we know may have, again, more of this progression of disease and associated inflammation going on. Anti-infections or anti-infective agents. So again, a laundry list of things that are being developed right now. And of course, some of our inhaled antibiotics that are already available for use in the United States here. Just want to point out that this is an area whereby, we have a decent number of people who tend to have some nasty bugs that they are culturing in their lungs. And we are somewhat short on the availability of some other agents aside from what we have available right now. So just know that there are additional inhaled agents and also different types of therapies being looked at to help people with CF handle or battle infections to a greater extent. I do want to just highlight this concept of phage therapy. Phage therapy, and again, there's a couple of these in the pipeline right now, but bacteriophages are a type of specialized virus that have the ability to kill certain bacterial strains. And they're just found naturally in the environment, but they are predators of bacteria in nature. So there are ongoing studies looking at phage therapy to really help treat things like chronic pseudomonal infections that are not maybe responding to other therapies, and really help people with these types of infections do much better in the long run. Just quickly from a GI treatment landscape here, just know that, of course, we do have our pancreatic enzyme replacement therapies available. What is in the pipeline right now are just different forms of these pancreatic enzyme replacement therapies that are essentially not animal derived. So they're man-made versions of these lipase enzymes that are currently being looked at in trials. So again, I know I'm really running out of time, but I'm just going to wrap up here so we can open it up to questions. It's obviously a very bright future. I just covered a lot of material, and you can already see that there's a ton of progress being put forth by the CF Foundation. We already know that the FDA has expanded approval of 3 CFTR modulators using in vitro data to people with certain mutations outside of what they were already eligible for. Kalydeco's down to infants as young as 4 months of life, but the work is not done, of course, until everyone has a therapy that addresses the underlying cause of the disease. Remember, the Path to a Cure is this big research initiative that's accelerating treatments for everyone with CF and hoping to deliver a cure. There's a ton of money being invested into this to, again, increase all of these efforts that are being made. So where are we going moving forward? Well, I just addressed a lot of the different things that are exciting and are hopefully going to be something that come to the table in the future, of course. But the goal here is really to continue drawing innovators and promising genetic technologies to the table so that all of this exciting work can be continued. And also to, of course, advance therapies that address that underlying cause of CF for those with nonsense or rare mutations. And again, like I talked about earlier with the CFTR modulators, the hope is that we can continue to advocate for approval of these modulator therapies for as many mutations as possible. And of course, as early as possible that we can start them. So the earlier the age, the hope is the better outcome. And then some of the other areas of key focus here are to advance some of these new and improved treatments to address a lot of these other manifestations of CF. So how can we, again, help treat patients with infections to a better extent? So focusing on some of these approaches. And then again, this is the bottom here. This is something that I really am hopeful about in the future, talking about some of the ways to prevent and treat the serious manifestations of CF outside the lung. How can we come up with better understandings and treatments to address things like the GI symptoms, liver disease, CF-related diabetes? Again, these should be big focuses moving forward. For patients who've undergone lung transplant, trying to understand how we can prevent or treat chronic rejection to a greater extent. And again, from an inflammatory standpoint, airway clearance and mucus clearance, advancing some of these newer therapies for CF are really things that are of primary focus in progress right now with research, and again, helping us to promote some of these newer therapies moving forward. And finally, remember, with all of this in hand, the fight continues until CF stands for Cure Found. So with that, I know I may be, okay, we have a few minutes maybe for some questions, but I thank you all for listening. And again, the chapter and the CF Foundation for supporting all of this.
Oh, thank you so much, Dr. Weinstock. We're so grateful for your incredible presentation. And I say this every time, even though I work for the foundation, every time I get to tune in and be part of this day, I feel like I learn so much. So we are so honored. We do have a good handful of questions, so I'll just jump right in to be able to save time to get along to other speakers. And Dr. Weinstock, if you feel like this question is better suited for someone else on the panel, we can always save it for later, but you know so many things. So here we go. First question is, when do we expect Trikafta will be approved for F508 adults younger than 2?
So I'm sure it will happen in the near future. I know ongoing efforts are being made to look at that. Of course, I cannot forecast or give an exact date yet, but I know it certainly is something that is being looked into. I wouldn't imagine that, of course, is going to be this year potentially, but just know it is something that I think will eventually happen, because the earlier the better, I think, to start these therapies.
Thank you. Next question is, what about the most common Delta F, but post-transplant?
In terms of treatments for patients that have undergone transplant?
I'm assuming that is what the question is. Yes, I'm getting a nod. Yes, exactly.
Okay. So yeah, so I mean, of course, we know there are other manifestations outside of the lung in people with CF. So we do still have to keep this in mind and again treat everyone appropriately. So this is the hope, I think, with the future of again the research that's being poured in, trying to treat all of these other manifestations aside from just the lung. As far as it goes with the modulator therapies for people post-transplant, I know there is some talk, with people in starting things like Trikafta, even post-transplant, or restarting it. I think that is something that we individualize. But again, there is certainly work that needs to be done with the other manifestations of the disease that certainly somebody post-transplant is still going to be dealing with.
Okay, you got a thumbs up on that one. Thank you, Dr. Weinstock. Next question, how do we know if we have a nonsense rare mutation?
So once, of course, let's say we have a positive sweat chloride test, we're going through the whole motions of figuring out if somebody truly has cystic fibrosis. Usually the next step after sweat chloride tests are confirmed is to do genetic testing. So we have the capability now to screen and look for, again, just keep in mind, there are well over 1,000 mutations that are attributed to cystic fibrosis. So with the extended testing that's available right now, we have the ability to do these genetic types of testings that can allow us to figure out, well, okay, here's a mutation the person has. what class of mutation is it? Is it a nonsense mutation? We have all of these categorized, fortunately. So it would be something like a blood test that is done. And once we have those results, if the mutation has been recognized, by, the laboratory or again, in general, then we would be able to, understand maybe the severity of the disease and what somebody would be eligible for based on that type of genetic testing.
Thank you, Dr. Weinstock. And then real quick, I just want to touch, Dr. Goss added a comment in regards to the previous question about post-transplant. Dr. Goss added, we are actively studying Trikafta after lung transplant with funding from the CF Foundation. So it sounds like a lot more to come in that space.
Yes.
All right, another question. What about fresh air and exercise?
Well, I am always a big proponent of that. Fresh air, I think, is just fantastic for everybody. Exercise in and of itself is a form of good physiotherapy. You're moving everything around, you're getting the body going. I am always 100% on board with that, as tolerated, of course. So absolutely have nothing negative to say about that.
Perfect. Probably good for all of us, with or without CF, I think. Another question, what are the objectives of the alternative enzymes being developed? Lower cost, higher efficacy?
Well, I think it's more, to me, I don't really imagine the efficacy would be much better, although we'll have to see. They are still very early on in trials, but I think it may be more of a preference, a personal preference. Maybe, some people out there prefer the man-made version over an animal-derived type of an enzyme. That's one of the big, I guess, things that would be setting it aside from the ones that are available right now. Aside from that, I have not seen any other data that allows it to look maybe superior than to what's available right now.
Awesome. Okay, a couple more. And then we will let you go, Dr. Weinstock, and we'll pass the torch. But has there been any connection between CF and neurological issues found, i.e. muscular weakness?
Not that I'm aware of. That's not usually one of the primary manifestations that I've come across with that. Maybe somebody else can speak to that, one of the other speakers, but I am not aware of any of that, or muscle weakness at least being a big issue.
Okay. And then last question for now, has Simplify changed the array of prior traditional CF prescriptions?
So the Simplify study, of course, as of last year or even the year before, we saw some very encouraging data there. It was a 6-week study, so we didn't have too much long-term data there, but essentially the outcome of that was, you have somebody doing well on Trikafta, close to normal lung function, and can we simplify their medication or airway clearance regimen? And what the data showed was that by removing either hypertonic saline or pulmozyme, the person really did not have any significant changes. So I think, we do have that area or that data to support, again, somebody who's doing really well to maybe say, yes, you could potentially stop one or the other and still do very well. I personally would like to see some longer term data, and I know there are some other trials ongoing to look at a longer time period to see if all of this is sustained. But it did look very, very positive. So that is something absolutely to keep in mind.
Amazing. Okay, well, that is the end of questions for now. So again, thank you so much, Dr. Weinstock. We're so appreciative of you taking the time and just sharing so much to kick off our morning. And if anyone listening has a question that they couldn't quite get out during this time, please feel free to send a note, and we are happy to follow up as well with that also. So thank you so much, Dr. Weinstock, for your time this morning.
Thank you, Erica. Have a great day, everybody. I'll still stay on, but thank you
Perfect.
for having me.
All right, thank you. And then just to add on, it looks like Dr. Goss did add a note about that Simplify study. There is a long-term version going on in England right now, so definitely more to come. And while we're just transitioning, another nice plug from one of our advocacy leaders in our Washington, Alaska community said, please advocate with your congressional delegation for passage of the Pasteur Act to combat antibiotic drug resistance. We will, as this goes on, I'll go into the CF website and put some more information about advocacy in the chat also. So if that's something you're curious to learn more about, advocacy is a huge way to support from wherever you are, and a way to help those with cystic fibrosis have all the representation to tackle the things they need outside of just what the foundation's doing and the medical piece. So that's a nice little plug there. Thank you, Dr. Fisher. With that, I get to turn it over to Dr. Mila, who is joining us from abroad, but took time out of his big trip to join us this morning as well. So we are so lucky to have him. Dr. Mila is the professor of pediatrics and director of the Stanford Cystic Fibrosis Center, Associate Director for Translational Research, Center for Excellence in Pulmonary Biology at Stanford University School of Medicine. So we are very honored to have Dr. Mila joining us. Today, Dr. Mila is going to talk about looking into the crystal ball, the lives of people with cystic fibrosis. And again, if you guys have questions, go ahead and pop them into the Q&A box. Dr. Mila, we are so honored you are joining us from so far away and taking time to be with us. So go ahead, Dr. Mila. Thank you.
Thank you. Can you hear me and see my slides?
Yes, perfect. I see your slides and
All
I
right,
hear you.
perfect. Perfect. Thank you so much for the invitation. I really appreciate your bringing a community together, which is fantastic. And I'm right now 4 hours away. I'm in Puerto Rico, and I'm on a conference talking about a rare disease that looks like CF, but it's not CF. And we're talking here today about, what the future will bring. And I think I'm well informed because I can talk about CF and say we're living the future when it comes to CF. And that's what I would like to do with my talk, just to give you some more like thoughts about, where we think we're going as people with CF, not so much from a medical or scientific perspective. So I think we are, and I'm a conflicted individual. I have a number of conflicts of interest because obviously all the research that we do needs to be paid by someone. But this is sort of as a quick snapshot as to, what is the history of CF, because I think we're going to make a CF go as a disease going into history as, just becoming a condition that people carry. And the most amazing thing is that, how the life expectancy for people with CF has so dramatically improved, particularly once we turn into the 21st century. And per the last report from the CF Foundation, we're getting pretty close to 60 years in North America, and I think the global experience with other countries that are fairly advanced in therapeutics or CF is also that, the life expectancy is now getting into the 60s. And this has really accelerated, but I want to tell you, it really started accelerating before we even were thinking about modulators being a potential therapeutic for CF. And I think in great part is for thanks to things that we're doing today, which is coming together as a community and talking about, what are the issues, what we need to do that will bring us to the next level. And I think in great part, the CF Foundation putting together all these quality improvement and standards of care and guidelines of care initiatives is what slowly has made with what you can call establishing best practices that are spread around the country and around the world. So I think one of the first goals when we started with this sort of quality improvement mantra was to give you guys the confidence that when you go to a CF center, no matter what part of the country you're in, that you will be getting pretty much the same level of care. And I think that's one of the things that really, at least in my opinion, contributed dramatically to where we are today with CF, because it provided the best groundwork for what was going on also in parallel, which is all the research and all the efforts that have gone into adding different therapeutics to what we do with patients with CF nowadays. And there have been many different treatments that have been added over the years. And these also thanks to, I don't know how many of you have participated of clinical trials. If you have, thank you. If you haven't, thank you for thinking about it. We're going to be doing many more trials over the years. So we certainly need to keep you guys well informed as well as involved in one way or another. And obviously, now that we are in the era of modulators, and particularly with the introduction of Trikafta just a little over a couple of years ago, we're seeing that, perhaps our predictions are now going to fall short. So that's why I'm talking about this sort of looking into a crystal ball, right? Now that we have these transformative therapies and more to come, because that is not going to stop. We're not stopping the clock, really, when it comes to development of new therapeutics. Where is it that we're going to take things and what kind of predictions we can make? Now, I can tell you that this slide is one of the most satisfying ones that I've ever looked at, because I can also tell you I've been doing CF for a very long time, and this is sort of summarizing my career in CF. I haven't really contributed much to what this graph is showing, but I started around 1992, and in part what drew me into CF was the discovery of the gene. From a scientific perspective, I saw it as an opportunity to work on something that was going to lead to something really important, and that's where we are nowadays. But in the days when I started my career, we were talking about 2/3 of the patients, a little over 2/3 of the patients, 70% of the patients were pediatric age, and I was trained as a pediatrician. And less than 1/3 of the patients were adult age, and here talking about 18 years as the age cutoff that was used. And I think the CF Foundation was smart enough to, without a crystal ball even, thinking that, we're going to be successful, this picture was going to change over the years, and we needed to get much more pulmonary adult physicians involved in the care of CF patients, which led to the establishment of a network of adult centers that work in tandem and in partnership with the pediatric centers. And, it's very interesting. And again, as a pediatrician, very rewarding to see how over the years, we are now looking into the majority of people with CF in the U.S. being adults. It's almost like we flipped. Now we're getting pretty close to 2/3 of the patients being adults, and the minority of the patients being pediatric age. And this is simply because, well, in part, I think the population dynamics in North America haven't changed much. The birth rates are somewhat stable, and that's why year by year, the incidence keeps being the same, meaning we're going to have a fairly stable, steady number of kids identified with CF at birth, but they're going to be moving into adulthood. So now it's more of an expectation, and it's what we tell our families. It's an expectation that, you are going to grow up with this condition, we don't call it disease, that we call CF, and you are most likely going to be a productive member of society. Because one of the things that always comes to mind when we look at these statistics, right, it's okay, you're talking about old people that are getting old with this CF condition, but how are they doing? How are they feeling? What is their condition all about? And I think this is, to me, one of the most interesting pieces, is that we're seeing, at least in the registry data from 2022, that now we're getting to more than 15% of the patient population, which is a pretty significant number, being older than 50 years of age, meaning we're already talking about CF not just becoming an issue in the sense of we need adult care, but now we're talking about we're going to need to think about retirement age in CF, we're going to need to start thinking about geriatric care for CF. Certainly a very different picture than when I started my career. And this is, to me, probably the most interesting and most thought-provoking aspect of CF nowadays, which is, well, you guys are really overachievers, right? If you look at the data from the latest registered report, close to 70% of people with CF have some degree of higher education, including professional education. And if you compare this with the national statistics, I think in the US it's getting more to about 60% or so. So we're even beating, and that I know from my CF families, we are working with kids that are very smart and are overachievers. And not just, they're getting good education, but they're also becoming productive members of society. The levels of employment, either full-time or part-time, among people with CF is pretty high, and really beats what we see with other conditions, and even with certain segments of the population. Now, the other thing that is really important is that, well, young ladies with CF now are giving more thought about also starting families, and we're seeing a dramatic increase in the number of pregnancies among young ladies with CF. So with all this, I think we're also seeing that there's a very important improvement in the different health parameters that we monitor in CF. Most of you are probably quite familiar with how obsessive we are in the CF clinics about things like your lung function, your weight, your nutrition. And these are very important aspects that are associated with CF, and they're the ones that lead to, the symptomatology and the problems that people experience over time. But I think the really good news is that we're seeing how now people with CF have gotten to a point. If we look on the left-hand side, we have the data for the children, and on the right-hand side, the data for the adults. And what we're seeing is that based on what we know from the latest registry report, children have on average what you could call normal lung function and normal nutritional parameters like the BMI. And adults are also showing us pretty much the same picture, because an FEV1, and most of you are probably familiar with that when you come to clinic, your PFT or your lung function is measured by the FEV1. It's one of the metrics that we follow. And you will see that about the median value, meaning the average person with CF that is an adult between 20 and 40 years of age is having an FEV1 that most adult pulmonary physicians will consider fairly normal at 90%. And the same thing when you look at a parameter like the BMI, most of us would like to keep our BMI around 23 because that's what is considered a healthy BMI, meaning that you're maintaining a body that fits well on your frame. You're neither underweight nor skinny if you're at around that level. And we're seeing that again in 2022, patients with CF that are adults are keeping that level of BMI. So it's certainly a very rapid evolution when it comes to the health status now measured not necessarily by what I think matters the most is, which is, how you're functioning in society, but by certain clinical parameters that we've gone from, lung function that in the kids was somewhat abnormal, below 80%, we'll consider it already abnormal, to clearly abnormal, 50% in 1992. And now we're talking about, seeing people that have fairly normal values. And I think, again, this, if you look at to just connect the dots, you will see that this has been a progression and an acceleration really over the last few years, but that really started before we even had modulators. So in some ways, this is also a little bit of food for thought for people that are not yet eligible for modulators. I'll say, yes, you need to be patient because at least now we have really good standards of care and a really good understanding as to how to deal with CF as a disease. So we sort of get it out of your way so you can continue having a productive life until we have, a cure for all, or at least all these novel therapies. And thank you to Dr. Weinstock. He made my life easy not having to explain all of the different therapies that are on the horizon and the ones that are already in the clinic. But again, I think regardless of what therapeutics we have on hand or yet to come, we very, very well understand that, we need to provide good treatment options for everyone, irrespective of your age, your condition, or your genetic mutation. Now, the other thing that is really important is that, we're seeing, as opposed to the 90s and even the early 2000s, that the red side of the pie here, which is severe lung dysfunction, which we will categorize as a value in the FEV1, meaning the lung function below 40%, has decreased substantially. And this is important because the red were typically the people that we would be fairly worried about, and we will be thinking and having discussions about lung transplantation. So we basically have substantially decreased the number of people that are experiencing severity in the lung disease that at some point will call for lung transplantation. And that's a remarkable step forward really in the care of CF patients. Now, along with this, we have also seen that, again, the death rates have dropped dramatically, but we're also seeing this sort of shift as to how our patient population is aging, and also how we've made a shift in the risk for significant complications and death. And I think, we're just at the start of this. I think we're going to continue to not just make progress on this, But if I put it in parallel to what the U.S. population looks like nowadays, meaning the, let's say, non-CF U.S. population, we're seeing that, there's still a gap to close. But I think we're going to start accelerating on this with all the knowledge at hand and also with all these patient population that is incrementally being added to the novel therapeutics, particularly with the modulator therapy. And I cannot even think how this is going to be once we get into being able to treat our youngest patients, meaning babies that are early identified and can start early on Trikafta, which I think is not going to be too far from today, that we'll be able to extend the indication for that medication. So I think, we still have a long way to go, but certainly, we keep making a fairly fast strides towards continuing to close these gaps, so we approximate even more to what the U.S. general population looks like. At least we're seeing that happening with things like education, employment, and probably the things that matter to you the most, which is, how can I function day to day? Now, the really important thing is that we still need to continue to work together hand in hand on, making you be at your best. And I think particularly for people that are already modulators, we need to start paying much closer attention because I feel that we're still on the 20th century when it comes to how are we monitoring things, how are we assessing problems, and we need to really start catching up and try to make a big jump towards getting better at how we're going to assess patients and help them with their problems. And this is one of my patients, and it's summarized, what happened with this young lady last year. Is someone that is on Trikafta. I'm not going to show what the PFTs look like prior to Trikafta. This is someone that has been on Trikafta already 3 years. And you can see that, comes to clinic one day, the FEV1 is about 90. We're all very happy, completely asymptomatic, no problems. And then we say, well, standard of care is come back in 3 months, comes back in 3 months. It looks a little better. Everything is good, no changes. Come back in 3 months, comes back 3 months later. It's about the same. I don't know if this one was a fluke or these two are a fluke. We're also calling it within the same. A few months go by because there's not 3 months. We try to see patients every 3 months, but sometimes it's 4, sometimes it's 5. It depends, life happens. And then we see that the FEV1 is now dramatically different than previous, right? Now you see here, the big question is, because this is a visit that we were all surprised, including this patient, because didn't feel like this. So the question is, is this a fluke? Or are all these a fluke? Or did this happen just today? Did it happen 2 weeks ago? Or did it happen the next week when this person was here in clinic? It's filling these gaps, what I think is problematic, and it's what I call the 361-day problem, right? We're doing these assessments 4 times a year, but, the year has 365 days. So what happens on those 364 days that we're not seeing in clinic? And I think we need to start making better use of better tools to start closing these gaps and also be more on real time and on real life because you all have day-to-day lives. So I think we're at a point where we're all very seriously rethinking, what our care models are, particularly now that we're well into the 21st century. And this is the way I think about this, regardless of whether you are or you're not on Trikafta. And I think we certainly need new paradigms. We have a very rapidly evolving population, not just in terms of, the different treatments, but also how we're doing diagnostics nowadays, where it can even be done before you're born. And obviously, we need to start thinking about these based on emerging evidence. It's always going to be good to have the proof that what we present to you is supporting the model that we want to approach. And obviously, technology, I don't know, maybe my bias is that I'm in the middle of Silicon Valley, so I'm very techy, but I think, again, we're still thinking the way and using the tools of the 20th century when we're well into the 21st century. And for sure, we need to continue to put a lot of emphasis on being very patient and family-centered. That has to be the model, no question about it. So active participation of the person in front of you, being the patient, the family, That has to be a must for any care process. And the second thing is that this also has to be very individualized. If I see someone on a clinic day, and I cannot apply that same approach to the person that comes next on the following appointment. We need to really move away from the cookie cutter approach. Unfortunately, there are a number, the CFF has recognized this for a while, and there are a number of undergoing initiatives to start looking at this, what the care model needs to look like, particularly now that we're well into the 21st century. And, I think we learn a lot from the COVID-19 pandemic. This is a very interesting graph, at least one that gives me a lot of food for thought, that comes from the CF Foundation, showing the number of clinical encounters, right? Because we have this sort of mandate or guideline that patients have to be seen every 3 months. It's the quarterly visits. And obviously, when we were all very scared and had to, be shelter in place, there was this drop in the number of visits. But, we started making use of technology through telehealth, being it by Zoom or the different platforms that every hospital has in place now to do telehealth. And the interesting thing is that the pandemic is now gone, but we're still, so we've gone back to see people in clinic, but we're still making use of telehealth. And if anything, and this is just up of 22, it'd be interesting to see how it looks for 23, but, it's looking like it's going to start picking up a little more. And I think in part, this is because the CF Foundation was also smart enough to look into how to provide some assessment tools at home. I'm sure some of you have one of these different toys that are out there that measure your spirometry, particularly, meaning your FEV1. So you can use it to, check yourself and then let us know. But if you think about it, just more from a practical perspective, no one is kind of taking a big breath and then going blah, 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 blah many times a day, right? What you do many times a day is you get up, you walk around, you do your exercise, maybe you go a flight of stairs up and down, or do all sorts of different activities. So this is a somewhat, the spirometer is a very artificial, more like a, call it, way of looking at what your lung function is like. But in my view, the way to look at your lung function is how you function day to day. So with my colleagues at Stanford a few years ago, we looked into how to do a more passive, meaning something that is not take a big breath and blah, 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 but not just passive, but also totally contactless in the sense that it's imperceptible to the subject. This is a sensor that is basically installed in the bed. And during the night, so at least when you're sleeping, we can look at a number of physiologic signals. And this was already published. The study was done in kids with asthma. From there, we're taking it to a different level. And I think, probably a few of you have an iWatch. And if you tell me that you're using your iWatch to just keep track of time, I won't believe you, because I'm sure you're using it to read your emails and texts, look at the weather, meaning these wearables have really revolutionized the way that we function day to day, including the ability to monitor many different aspects of your life. And we've been working with a company, startup company in San Francisco that has this very interesting, what we call a tag, because it looks like a clothing tag, if you look at it. And it's very durable. It has a battery that lasts for a year, and you can throw it on a washing machine many times, and it will still be very active. And we can monitor a number of things. And in a study done in COPD that was published a year ago, it showed that basically, the people that participated on this study, only, I think, 20% of them had not had a hospitalization. And then thanks to the monitoring, we were able to decrease the number of hospitalizations so that now the great majority of these people did not need a hospitalization. And why? Not that their disease went away, simply that we could pick up when there was a change way before they call clinic or they show up to the emergency room. So now we're very excited because we will be starting our trial, our pilot study with CF patients next week. We're going to be enrolling our first patient into this. And what we're trying to do is not just demonstrate, how techy this thing is, but how we can make a really close loop. When we pick up something that is changing in you, we'll be able to contact you immediately, make sure that it's not a fluke, that the device was thrown away or someone else was wearing it instead of you, and then make an assessment as to whether you need to come to clinic or not, or you need to just do a telehealth visit, and hopefully be able to detect change before it leads into what you can call a pulmonary exacerbation or a need for a hospitalization. Not only we're doing this, part of my interest in this is not necessarily to look at changes in symptoms, but see from all these physiologic signals, because we're capturing thousands of points on a daily basis. When you're walking, when you're exercising, when you're sitting down reading, when you're sleeping, and see if with this we can do a much better, not just real time, but also more what we call true phase as to what your lung function is like, without having you take a big breath and blah, blah, blah. And I think this is probably going to give us a lot of really important information as to how the lungs work in people with CF and what changes are going to be the most informative when it comes to trying to understand changes and also identify need for changes in treatment. And speaking about treatment, we're also doing, and this in part has been funded by the CF Foundation as well as NIH, we're looking at doing what we call point-of-person laboratory. We have created these very little devices. If you look at it, it's just the size of a dime. That is a little patch. There's a number of sensors that can do what we call biochemical monitoring. And it can not only measure things like chloride, for example, which, we could do chloride with these, or glucose. If you have diabetes, you're probably familiar with glucose sensors, as well as other metabolites, but we also can monitor drugs. So what we're doing as a demonstration project, and we've done it with animals and it works really well, is emulate what happens when you go home and you're on IV antibiotics. And here we use tobramycin. And we can basically do your whole tobramycin level and renal function monitoring with one of these little devices. So what we envision is that, you'll get one of these patches, we'll call you home, say, hey, put your patch on, look at your phone, send me the info, and then we'll call you back later saying, okay, same dose, or come to clinic, we need to check you up. So we can be much more sort of anticipated to the change and be able to act before any problems show up. And we're very excited about this because thanks to NIH, we're about to start what we call a demonstration project. We're going to be enrolling CF patients and demonstrate, the value of this type of monitoring. But I think, putting all this that sounds like science fiction and it's not really, it's just, as I said, catching up with the technology of the day at the time. I think, the standard of care for people with CF unquestionably, has historically been focused on evidence-based, and I think the CF Foundation has been instrumental on standardizing protocols that are spread across the network to be sure that, that any patient, no matter where you are, is going to be able to access what we can call best practices. And that, I think, has contributed tremendously to how much things have improved for the best in CF. And obviously, the addition of the modulators has created a real revolution in the management of CF. And I think there are going to be many more improvements coming to this. But at the same time, we need to start getting better at how we're going to monitor people with CF and how we're going to help them, stay healthy and reach their max. And certainly, we need to start embracing more the adoption of different technologies to, again, be more reality-based and also much more closer to what your specific situation is at the personal level. Because, again, we cannot really say that the average type of response applies to every single person. So I'd like to really thank you for inviting me and having been part of this meeting, and would love to hear your thoughts.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mila, for such an incredible and informative presentation. It is such a treat to get to hear from you and all the exciting things ahead, like you shared and touched on. We do have a few questions in the chat. To start, someone asks, does life expectancy correlate to types of genetic combinations?
Yeah, what we know is that you can, at a group level, when we talk about average, we're talking about the average person. But if I go one by one through all of your different conditions, you're not average. I think grossly speaking, if we look at categories, just broad categories of mutations, we know that there are mutations that completely disrupt and eliminate the CFTR protein function. And there are other mutations where the protein is somewhat squeaky and still has some level of activity. So if you use those two very broad categories, yes, you can distinguish that there's some difference there. So, for example, late diagnosis or people that come at an adult age to a final diagnosis of CF tend to have these types of mutations. But again, if you start looking at the individual level, there are many people that have very severe mutations, and they haven't experienced all the complications that would be predicted just based on what your mutation says.
Thank you so much. Another question, you ended up kind of touching on it, so maybe you don't have to speak too much on it, but someone almost knew. They had their own crystal ball to guess what you were going to ask, because they had said, does the 361-day problem get solved somewhat from home PFTs?
Yeah, I think the home PFTs are a good start. But again, PFTs, I'm trying to be, I don't know, a little, not necessarily against it, but nihilistic about it, because number one is not even 20th, and I think it started in the 19th century. We're starting doing this blow, and it only tells you, more like what is your reserve and not what your real level of function. And the second thing is that we're seeing that, in people who are modulators, particularly, the FEV1 has improved so much that it doesn't tell us as much. We know that there's still a lot going on that we may be missing, and it's really hard to tell on who is it that we're going to miss it.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And then kind of building off that, a question says, can the tags and wearable monitors you covered today be used by people with pacemakers? Also, are these in testing or are they available now?
Yeah, no, they don't have any major contraindication really, because, you can wear it next to your cell phone. The device sends the info to the cloud through a station that looks like a cell phone. And yes, it is available, it's commercial available. We're doing a demonstration project with CF patients. And again, not so much to show that it also works in CF. We're doing the pilot to then go to the CF Foundation and say, hey, this is a really interesting research question as to how much this can contribute to CF care. Not so much because of, as I said, this thing that it can tell you about symptoms and where you're getting an exacerbation, but we're very interested on what other signals this can pick up that will tell us about lung function. And I'm talking about lung function, again, I'm very much into the real-time, real life. What happens when you're walking? What happens when you're sleeping? So those are the signals that we really want to learn, because this is also very individualized. We're basically using machine learning to learn about your lungs, how those lungs are functioning, and what changes are telling us that something good happened or something bad is going to happen.
So amazing. Very, very exciting, Dr. Mila. Okay, one more question. Will the remote monitoring technology research trials be available in the Seattle CF centers? Do you know?
Well, right now, these are Stanford-only studies. The remote respiratory wearable is going to be at 2 sites. We're starting at Stanford, but UCLA CF Center is also going to be part of that. And we hope, with this demo project pilot, as we call it, to be able to attract the funding to then expand to other sites. Because yes, it'd be really cool if we could do this with many different centers.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Okay, let me see if I missed anything. Okay, perfect. I think that was all the questions. Dr. Mila, thank you so much. It was such an informative presentation. We're so grateful to have you here and joining us from so far away. You also, I'll have to share with you, got a little shout out for Stanford in the chat earlier from one of our folks turning in, who says, Dr. Richard Moss, who is now retired, helped to save our granddaughter Faith's life as a newborn in 2003. She is now a thriving college student, 21 years old. So big shout out to your peers as well, and to you, Dr. Mila. We so appreciate you being here and wish you safe travels as you return home, and lots of good collaboration at your conference.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much. All right, I now get to kick things along to another wonderful presenter we have with us today. Again, we're so fortunate to have this incredible lineup of folks. Dr. Michelle Drobny is joining us now, and she joins us as Adult Associate Program Director with Providence Medical Group at the Cystic Fibrosis Clinic in Spokane, Washington. Today, Dr. Drobny is going to talk about the importance of primary care in cystic fibrosis. So lots of great information continuing to come. As a reminder, pop anything you'd like in the chat, and then questions just in the Q&A box, and we'll make sure to dedicate time as well for Dr. Drobny's presentation. So with that, thank you so much for joining us today.
Great, thanks for having me. Oh, there we go. My video just changed. Erica, can you hear me? Just confirm.
I can hear you and see you perfectly.
Great, okay. Let me pull up my slides. And now, of course, I can't find the share screen. Oh, there it is, right in the middle of the screen.
It likes to hide right in the center, as things do
Yeah.
in our fridge. You know, the middle shelf is where nothing can be found.
Okay, there we go.
All right, perfect. We can see your slides.
Okay, great. Well, so I'm Dr. Michelle Drobny, and I'm going to be talking about the importance of primary care. Just a little bit about me. I'm just adjusting this view here. So I am a family medicine physician, and I am in Spokane, Washington. I'm the Associate Program Director of the Adult Cystic Fibrosis Center here. I'm also the Associate Program Director for the Family Medicine Residency Training Program that is in Spokane at the Teaching Health Clinic. And that's where I practice clinical medicine, and I have a panel of patients that I see as their family physician. So I'm family medicine trained in Tacoma, Washington, and family medicine means that I take care of children all the way up to the elderly, and even for a period of time delivering babies. And then I still take care of patients when they're admitted to the hospital. I enjoy skiing, gardening, and being a social butterfly. So that's a little bit about me. And that's my daughter, who's starting to learn how to ski and doing great. Okay, so first I wanted to talk a little bit about just what is primary care? What does that mean? And there's different physicians or providers that are considered primary care. So family medicine physicians like me, also internal medicine physicians. And the difference is that internal medicine physicians mainly take care of adults, only take care of adults, and don't practice as much obstetrics. And then pediatricians also are considered primary care, and of course they take care of children. OBGYNs also are included. So a lot of women get their primary care with their OBGYNs. And then there's also a variety of physician's assistants, nurse practitioners, and the above specialties that practice alongside these physicians and in the same way. And depending on the state, they may be practicing more independently or directly with a physician. So some benefits to having a primary care provider is that you have one provider that knows your whole health history, your health goals, and then coordinates between specialists. And so this is something that I do a lot is patients will have several different specialists, and sometimes they're talking, sometimes they're not, but everything comes to me, and then I filter it, make sure the chart is updated. If I see discrepancies, I'll bring those up either to the patient or to the specialist. And then just knowing about the patient as a whole and not broken up by body system, I think is a really big benefit. Another really big benefit is creating a plan to prevent illness. And so that, so we treat patients who are having illness or have chronic disease, but also a big part of what we do is trying to prevent things. And so screening for things like diabetes, cancer, getting vaccines, talking about mental health, really trying to help before things become really a big problem. So that's a big part of what we do. And then they've actually found that access to a regular primary care physician include lower infant mortality, higher birth weights, immunization rates are higher than national standards. overall lower costs for healthcare, and then just longer, healthier lives for people. So family medicine, I mentioned a little bit. That's the technically the specialty that I practice. They're considered a specialist qualified to treat most diseases and provide comprehensive health care for people of all ages, so from newborns to seniors. Caring for patients regardless of age, health condition, and creating that trusting relationship. Also taking into account community factors, social determinants of health, so where people live, what kind of resources they have, working closely with social workers. Also serving as usually the first point of contact for health concerns. So somebody has an issue, they come in to see their primary care provider, family physician, possibly, and we start the workup. And a lot of times we can complete the whole diagnosis really. But then if we get to a point where maybe we need a second opinion or unsure where to go next, then we get the specialist involved. But the first contact, checking basic labs, doing imaging if we need to, we get all of that started. Another big thing we do that I mentioned, navigating the healthcare system, because that can just be a real big challenge. So between the specialist, hospital care, follow-up, things like that. And then using the EHR to coordinate services, enhance care. So EHR, like the medical records. So a lot of what we do is even not in the appointment, but looking for those preventative care things that people need. So if somebody needs to be, like they need to get their flu shot, reaching out to them, or they need a mammogram to screen for breast cancer. And then because we take care of the whole family, a lot of times we actually do take care of the whole family. So we may be taking care of parents and children, really considering the impact of the health on the whole family and looking at that big picture. So again, common services that primary care offers: the preventative care, chronic disease management. So chronic disease management, a lot of what we do is diabetes management, high blood pressure, high cholesterol, depression, anxiety. And then also doing what some people call acute care visits, kind of like an urgent care. So for our patients, if they have an injury, roll their ankle, need stitches, things like that, we're able to address those things as well. Family planning, that's another big part of what we do. So providing birth control, talking about different options. And we do procedures, so we can do IUDs, and then the Nexplanon. So these are long-acting ones that your doctor could tell you more about, but beyond just pills is what we can do. And then mental health, mentioned that before. So things like antidepressants and other things like that, getting people connected with counseling. And then another big thing that we do is substance use support. And that has been growing more and more in family medicine and primary care, mainly because there's a little bit of a lack of psychiatrists. So we've been able to step into that role and providing medication to help patients and just support in general. So I talked a lot about preventative health, like things that trying to prevent disease. And so a couple of the things that we do a lot of is addressing high cholesterol, hyperlipidemia, and a common thing that we do for that is just a blood test. And so that's an easy way to check for that. And then same with diabetes. I know there's a lot of screening with cystic fibrosis and different blood tests that are done. And so we do those as well. We check for cervical cancer for women by doing a pap smear, that's a pelvic exam. And then sexually transmitted diseases, usually that can actually be as simple as a urine and blood test, but also swabs as well. And then for breast cancer, doing mammograms, sometimes ultrasound, but usually mammograms. Colon cancer, there's a couple options, just doing a stool test or doing a colonoscopy, like a scope exam. And then depression, anxiety, we check for those with questionnaires. And so part of what is so important about like bringing this to your population is that there have been so many changes with people with cystic fibrosis. So some of the protective factors for several diseases are going away with the gene modulators. So like high cholesterol, which leads to heart attack and stroke, and having low weight, things like that. Those protective factors are going away. And so we're seeing more and more of high cholesterol, which, like I said, can lead to heart attack and stroke. And then just other health problems are now becoming more important to people, including mental health, substance use, or age-related diseases. And so I want to talk a little bit about heart disease, because this now is becoming, like I said, more and more important for people with cystic fibrosis. It is the leading cause of death for, just in general, men and women of most racial and ethnic groups in the United States. And so also it can be a somewhat silent disease until something really bad happens, like a heart attack or a stroke. And so there's a stat there about 1 in 5 heart attacks are silent. So there's damage done to the heart or possibly even death, but the person's not aware of it in the moment. So that is why screening and checking, getting those labs checked periodically is so important. And then getting treatment for that if it's something that your physician recommends. I also wanted to highlight cervical cancer because this one is also really important and pretty preventable as long as people are getting checked. And also there is a vaccine that I'll talk about. So cervical cancer most often happens in people over the age of 30. And the main cause is actually a virus, HPV. And so lots of people actually have HPV, the virus, and usually they clear it. And it doesn't cause cancer. And so at least half of people who are sexually active will probably have HPV at some point, but few do get cancer. But again, it is common. And so the vaccine can be really helpful, and also getting screening tests to check for cancer or pre-cancer, because when it is found, any sort of precancerous cells or cancerous cells in the cervix, it's really highly treated if it's found early. And so cervical cancer, a lot of the other cancers that we check for, the reason we check for them when people don't have symptoms is because we want to catch it early. So a lot of these cancers, if you wait until you're having pain or having bleeding or like a weird fullness in your belly, things like that, a lot of times the cancer is a lot more advanced and then harder to treat. And so we are very purposeful about the cancers that we do check for, because people will ask, why do I need to get checked if I don't have symptoms? And the reason is that if we catch it early, then again, it's highly treatable and people do really well. And then mental health is a huge part of what primary care physicians address. So more than 1 in 5 adults live with mental illness, and we're finding more and more that it's an equally important part of health. And so that's why a lot of times when you go to the doctor's office, you'll get screening questionnaires asking about anxiety and depression, and then we can have a conversation about it. Sleep is another big part of what family physicians help address. So this one goes hand in hand with mental health a lot of the time, because if you're not sleeping well, dealing with mental health is just almost impossible. And so we usually address these things together. So just a couple of stats there about trouble falling asleep and then staying asleep. So you can see there how many people are really, really struggling with that. And I'm really lucky at our clinic, the Spokane Teaching Health Clinic. We actually have a psychologist who specializes in addressing sleep through a variety of different methods. And then physicians, we can also prescribe medication to help, but usually we need these things together to really be helpful. And that is the end of my presentation. So I am happy to answer questions, and I'll stop sharing my screen.
Thank you so much, Dr. Drobny. So much great information, and really appreciate you taking the time. I have a question that someone had asked who wasn't able to join the call today, but had hoped that I would pass along, and maybe you can speak to it just in the wide range of things that you see in, family practice, which is about Trikafta and its impact on mental health with different ages of CF folks, so adults, kids, teens, etc. And if you've, what you've kind of seen around that, or if you can comment on that at all.
I think that's a really big question.
It's a really big question.
One that I would probably be mainly speculating about and haven't had a lot of firsthand experience. I will say that I think and maybe this is what they were getting at with the question, but with Trikafta and really people's futures changing and what is possible and what they thought their lives were going to look like, I think that we know that mental health is just really important because there's been a lot of changes, and thinking that your life is going to go one way and then all of a sudden having a big change, like it makes sense that you would need help really processing that. And so I think as a primary care physician, like really checking in with people and seeing how we can support them is really important. And like I said, it can involve some medication to help people get over the hump and get motivated to see a counselor or just figure out their goals, things like that. And we're happy to help with those things.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Yes, a big question for sure. And lots of layers there. Another question is, can you share or comment on diet recommendations for people with cystic fibrosis to make sure they're getting enough calories, but also being thoughtful around preventing things like high cholesterol, heart disease, etc.?
Yeah, and so I think this is going to be somewhat patient dependent. So talking with the center's nutritionist is going to be the most important thing to see for that person, what's going to be important for them. And then if they're on Trikafta or different medication as well. I will say that in general, the best evidence for the healthiest diet, well, actually, before I say that, the best diet is the one that people are going to eat. So I actually get this question a lot about, how much should I exercise? How much should I do this or that or whatever? And I can tell you stats and we can look at studies. But the thing is what are you going to actually do and what works in your life? And so in general, though, we recommend, if you're trying to say like the best evidence would be a whole food plant-based diet. And that would be preventing heart disease, diabetes, things like that. And I would, again, work with your nutritionist on this. If you have any deficits in vitamins, things like that, you would want to be careful. But a whole food plant-based diet means like avoiding processed foods, added sugars, like the things that you're eating look like what they looked like when they were grown. So as close to that as possible. So having like fruit versus having juice, or having grapes versus raisins. And I'm not saying you can't have raisins, but as an example of like what something kind of processed looks like. And then just for the Mediterranean diet actually is really similar to, and involves a little bit more fish and a little bit more meat and a little bit of dairy. But more and more we're finding that people who want to avoid these diseases, the people who are living really long, they're following these diets. And I can talk more about that, but that's kind of maybe a little bit of a general answer.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Another question is, and this maybe is, again, kind of a big question, but do you lower the dosage of Trikafta for people with mental issues associated with the drug? If so, how does one do that?
I don't manage the Trikafta as the primary care physician. So leaving that to the specialists. So yeah, sorry, I can't answer that.
That's okay. We'll leave that question open, and maybe one of our other speakers can touch on that later if that makes sense for them to pop in the chat or speak to.
I do want to add though that especially here in Spokane, I work really closely with our specialist. And so when these things come up, we have a great relationship where we can just message back and forth like, hey, could this be contributing to this problem that I'm seeing? Do you recommend a dose? So it's not like throwing up my hands like, oh, I can't address that. But it's that I'll leave any of those, dosing changes specifically to them, but really working closely with the specialist.
That's awesome. Yes, I think it's so amazing just all how you touched on all the people that come into play and how really what it looks like to treat someone holistically, and like
Mhm.
you've talked about and touched on, so much to look at in addition to someone's CF experience, but the other layers that play a role as well. So, well, thank you so much, Dr. Drobny. We're so grateful for you taking time today to join us from Spokane, and look forward to connecting with you again in the future.
Great. Thank you. Thanks for having
Thank you
me.
so much. Okay, next I get to turn things over to Dr. Chris Goss, and he popped in the chat. He can speak to the last question as well. So just know we will get to that question as well. Dr. Goss is a professor of medicine and pediatrics, associate dean of clinical research, and an adult cystic fibrosis provider with the University of Washington. Additionally, he is co-director of the Cystic Fibrosis Therapeutics Development Network Coordinating Center with the Seattle Children's Research Institute. And today, Dr. Goss is going to share updates on the therapeutic trial landscape in cystic fibrosis. So I'm sure many of you have heard from Dr. Goss before, and we're excited to welcome Dr. Goss back. Thank you so much for being with us and sharing today, Dr. Goss.
Oh, thanks so much for having me. This is a great event, and I really love the fact the event spans multiple states, a giant geographic region. It's really a really fun sort of approach. I'm going to share my slides here, and you'll tell me if you can see it well. Let me go to presentation mode. And then while we are using my main slide.
Yes, they look great. Thank you.
I will address at least what we do for anybody who's having mental health or anxiety issues with Trikafta. It is an area of, I think, active investigation by the CF Foundation. I know some groups are studying it. We have tended to try lowering of the dose, and we have some new tools at hand to make sure we understand what the implications of lowering a dose are. So we certainly follow lung function. We also have been able to now check and send out for Trikafta levels of all three drug components. So that's a send out test now available at National Jewish Health. So we've just started doing that in the last couple of months. And we also follow sweat chloride. So we send patients back to Children's Hospital to get their sweat chlorides done to see if there's any sort of, if a lower dose changes the sweat chloride response. There's not a lot of data to support that, but it's how we sort of hopefully encourage ourselves that lowering the dose doesn't take away some of the benefit of the drug. Helpfully inform patients what's happening when they do change dosing. So again, thanks for having me. You've seen this slide by Dr. Mila. This is something that we've used to sort of summarize all the improvement in survival, but also the improvement in therapies. And so the therapies are all listed when they came in, from the early 40s to all the way through to the current availability of elexacaftor, ivacaftor, tezacaftor. And the sort of market improvement in life expectancy. This is the 2018 life expectancy, but obviously we now know it's over 50. And the median life expectancy, and we do know that there's sort of been a pretty dramatic change per year in survival, and really marked certainly in the last 3 years with the advent of 3 to 4 years, the advent of widespread use of CFTR modulators. This is, I think, and I think it's been shown in the first slide, but I think it's really this is a great resource to go to figure out where things are in the therapeutic pipeline for cystic fibrosis. It's on the CF website. It's updated quite frequently, but it really gives you the sort of full spectrum of where drugs are being developed. And I'm going to focus most of my talk on this left-hand side, which is going to be all these drugs that restore CFTR function or are genetic therapies. But as you can see, and as was mentioned earlier, they're mucociliary clearance drugs, they're anti-inflammatory drugs, they're anti-infective drugs, and they're nutritional drugs. So they're really sort of hitting on all aspects of CF care. And what's important is this diagram shows where drugs are in preclinical state, meaning developing the evidence to go into humans. phase 1, which is usually safety as a primary goal and establishing a dose. Phase 2 are continued safety and then really starting to establish that the drug functions and works. And then say phase 3 are the true efficacy drugs. So you can see that actually the drugs above the line, below each of the colors, are all the drugs that are available to patients now. And when I started this this business in 1998 here at the University of Washington, we had basically enzymes, we had Pulmozyme, and we had inhaled Toby. And that was about it. So the expansion of the number of medications that we have available to treat all the different problems with CF are really extraordinary. And how do we do it? Well, we did it, I think, with a lot of support from the CF Foundation and driving this science forward toward patients. So this is a map of the United States where all the therapeutic development network sites are, and these are sites that conduct clinical trials in CF, and they're supported by the CF Foundation. But there's also other sites like so here are the therapeutic development network sites. There's also Success with Therapy sites, which are quality improvement sites that are focused on improving in a standardized way aspects of CF care that's current. And then there's another set of sites that are also focused on treating non-tuberculous mycobacterium. And you can see they're spread around the United States. And then there's a learning network, which is using real world data to hopefully improve the care of CF patients. And the last is the Lung Transplant Consortium, which is a group of centers that are large transplant centers trying to improve the outcomes of patients with CF who undergo lung transplant. And I think what really astounds me is the support from the CF Foundation, support from the CF community. So this is the research funding support in 2022. So almost $250,000 was spent. The vast majority on important CF research endeavors. So genetic-based therapies and treatments for rare or nonsense mutations, the mutations you heard about earlier, that's almost $60 million. The CF Foundation's lab, which is really instrumental in understanding the role of many, many different types of mutations and helping companies test their drugs. That was $12.8 million. And if you go down to CFTR modulators, that's $24 million. Clinical research support, which is a lot of studies I'll cover at the very end, which are helping us sort of look at our a lot of our aspects of care, often in clinical trials, and then treating the complications of CF, which is obviously now much more important as we think about diabetes, we think about bone disease, and we think about impacts of modulators on nutritional status. I do want to focus on the path to the cure, or what has been termed as the main emphasis of the CF Foundation. You know, they've committed to $500 million in investment to really changing the whole face of CF. And there are three big strategies: repairing broken CFTR, and this is really using CFTR that patients have that is mutated and letting it work, restoring CFTR protein when it exists, and then fixing or replacing the underlying genetic mutation. And all really address the root cause of CF. And really includes CFTR modulators, but RNA therapy, which you saw at the very beginning of the presentations today, are little bits of genetic material that code for the protein, and they can replace the protein, genetic therapy, and genetic editing. So again, the path to the cure, or PTAC, is really focused on DNA and RNA. And that's gene therapy and gene editing on the far left. And then it's non-sensor read-through, which means you have a mutation that has what's called a stop mutation that truncates the protein when it's trying to be read and turned into a protein, and that protein is dysfunctional. And then there are mRNA therapies and short nucleotide therapies, which you heard a little bit about earlier. And then CFTR modulators really work on existing protein that's usually in the cell or on the surface of the cell. And then the manifestations of CF is on the far right, which is really our traditional therapy. And that's how CF therapies began. So we have, again, potentiators, and potentiators are components of small molecules that are part of this PTAC, which they open the channel that exists on the surface of the cell and increase chloride conductance. So chloride then moves through the cell out to the outside of the cell, and that seems to be able to restore function. Then there are correctors that actually take a defective CFTR protein and move it to the surface of the cell. And again, that we know that the most common mutation in CF, which is the delta F508, is misfolded. The mutation causes a abnormal process where when sugars are stacked are placed on it, and that protein is recognized inside the cell and then digested in patients who have that mutation. However, we know correctors can actually allow that mutated protein to go to the surface and then be turned on by other drugs as part of the CFTR modulators. But we also heard about read-through, where you have compounds like Elox's compound, which allow you to go through an area of DNA and make RNA that actually continues past a stop mutation. Stop mutations tell the RNA to stop reading and produce these sort of truncated proteins. And then there are RNA therapies, but actually you just give the RNA that has normal CFTR in it to patients, and you give it by inhalation primarily, and then it goes directly into the cell and makes a normal protein. And the last, and I think the most exciting, is things like gene editing to repair the underlying gene defect, or gene replacement, where you actually provide a normal copy of CFTR DNA to the cells. Well, why should we be excited about this? Well, gene therapy has exploded in the pharmaceutical industry, and you can actually we now have these are all the products that are currently approved. They are approved by the FDA for gene therapy. So there's a gene therapy for beta thalassemia, spinal muscular atrophy, cerebral adrenoleukodystrophy, and those two conditions are very rare. There's a gene therapy for hemophilia A. And then, really exciting, in December, the FDA approved two drugs. One is actually from Vertex Pharmaceutical, but these are both drugs for sickle cell disease with different approaches to treating gene therapy. So the whole premise to be successful in gene therapy, to get a drug to a patient, is really now upon us. So that's why I think it's really important to focus that this is a realistic aim for CF patients. Well, this is how the CF Foundation approaches, I think, developing drugs, which I think is one of the reasons they've been so successful in leveraging the funds that all of us provide. I think it's the best foundation you could possibly support. They do drug discovery, and then they do formulation of that potential product in pharmacology and toxicology. And this is all the preclinical elements of a drug development program. They support many small companies in this area. Then we bring that information to the CF Foundation and to the Therapeutic Development Network for alignment to make sure that it makes sense. Is this going to be safe? Are all the key elements present that you really need to have a successful drug? And this is actually, there are patients involved in this. There are patients on the Clinical Research Executive Committee that help review some of this data. And then the protocol itself are reviewed. They're also reviewed with a large committee of CF scientists, CF providers, and CF patients. And then you go into the phase of trial. Phase 1, again, is safety. Phase 2 is safety and a little early efficacy. And phase 3 is when you prove your drug works to the FDA. And phase 4 is when you finished proving your drug and that you're doing post-marketing follow-up. So I think there's a really nice integrated vision to approaching this. So there are lots of platforms and technologies, and the CF Foundation provides money, scientific knowledge about CF, and a community input. And those are put together to create this sort of proof of concept in the laboratory, development of preclinical data, and then really optimization, selection of a product. And then you can go to this giant network and actually start to test your drug in CF patients. And those are really sort of targeted studies. And the one thing is it's a challenging filter to get through, even in standard drug development. It's challenging in CF as we move forward. So what tends to happen is there are a concept for CF, a company thinks they have a drug that's going to work. They then have a lot of back and forth with the CF Foundation and Therapeutics Development Network Coordinating Center and other key knowledge personnel that really help build us understanding, is this drug really something that should go forward into patients? And then it moves forward into clinical trials, also carefully overseen by a data safety monitoring board that's for all CF trials and has experience in CF. But this sort of partnership is a lot of how we got to the drugs that already have been in patients with CF and are part of our therapies. So it's this integrated relationship with companies and with patients and with the trial community that helps us actually get good trials going forward that actually have a good chance of success. So the success really has a lot of engagement for the CF Foundation. They have extensive experience in regulatory engagement for the FDA. We have the coordinating center here in Seattle where we know how to implement a trial and know all the sites, their strengths, and how we can actually design a trial that will be effective. There are industry and academic partnerships. So there's both academic sites and industry sites can help create these model systems and try to understand how we best design a product that will go into CF. And then there early developmental guidelines that the CF Foundation is crafting to help this drug development pathway. And then there's this CF lab resources, which is really can help understand and can be provided to companies to help them test their drugs in CF cell lines of many, many types of mutations. And last, there's an animal model infrastructure. So the CF Foundation supported the development of the CF pig. There's CF mouse, there's CF rat, and there's CF ferrets. There are also CF bunnies. But these animal model systems can help really understand how drugs work before they go into humans. So the active path to cure industry programs, there are now 7 active gene addition therapies, and 7 are now engaged. Again, this is fairly up-to-date data. Gene editing, there are 7 companies with 6 being engaged by the CF Foundation. Vehicle delivery, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. There are 8 with 7 engaged. Read-through and splice correction, there are 4. And then models and tools, which is to make sure we know these gene therapies work or don't work. There are 2 active and 3 engaged. So this is just a look at the pipeline for the genetic-based fit therapies. Arcturus is already in phase 1 trials. Vertex has, these are mRNA therapies. Vertex has a study that's in human trials. Recode is another one. These are mRNA, little bits of messenger RNA that will then, when entered in the cell, make a normal CFTR protein. And 2 of these are currently enrolling. SpliceSense is a ASO, which is sort of, I think we discussed a little bit more detail in the first discussion. And then there are 2 gene transfer trials. One is 4D and the other is Spirament. 4D is enrolling, and we hope to open here at the University of Washington in the next couple weeks, 2 months, to 1 month. But these are all the different companies in preclinical phase right now. So this is a lot of potential opportunities or potential shots on goal to find a therapy that's going to give us a dramatic breakthrough in CF gene therapy. But they're also exploring a lot of, so not only these companies exploring different sort of approaches to correcting and fixing the mutation, the CF Foundation is supporting a lot of folks who look at how you deliver the gene therapy. So a lot has happened. When I came to the University of Washington in the late 90s, we were involved in gene therapy trials at that time. We used AAV. At the time, there's a company in Seattle called Targeted Genetics, and that therapy did not work. But there's still, we still have therapies that use different types of packaging of the DNA cargo. There are lipid nanoparticles. There's something called a human bocavirus capsule that can actually deliver the genetic material to cells. But there are also these very elaborate new technologies, polymers, something called cell penetrating or cell specific peptides. extracellular vesicles. And again, this is trying to get your genetic material into the cells that count, that then it'll then be made into normal protein. The last is what's called a phage-derived particles, which is very innovative. And the CF Foundation is, I think, tackling this appropriate. You're not going to know which of these targets, these cargoes, is going to be most effective at delivering your DNA to the cells of interest. And they're also approaching quite broadly different approaches to think about gene insertion. Now, this is not happened yet, but it's obviously something thinking highly about. So there are certain approaches like what's called retargeting recombinase, and these are companies that use what's called RNA guided Cas9 or zinc fingers, and this is really gene editing. Or you retarget the recombinases to desired, so you want to get them to the place you want, and then code that DNA. There's also reprogramming of something called recombinase, and these companies use directed evolution or site-specific mutagenesis. So you mutate things specifically to alter the innate targeted capacity of these recombinases. These are things that sort of help build proteins from the DNA. And then there's also programming recognition of recombinase. This is a really cool and exciting technology. These are all really showing how different the approaches are to solving this problem. And these are companies use what's called prime editing and place a unique landing pad or beacons in the desired genomic locations. So then you can actually go in and fix that DNA. So this is all, cutting edge science that hopefully will lead to some novel therapies in CF. I did want to say that actually there's ongoing work, and I'm not going to talk about all the different drugs because obviously there are many, and you got a lot of that in the first, but I would want to talk a little bit about bacteriophages that I think was alluded to in the first talk. Bacteriophages are very cool. They are viruses targeted at bacteria. And what's really amazing about them is they're considered inert to mammalian cells. So you have bacteriophages in you right now. They were first discovered in the early 19th century. Some of the challenges and they've been used episodically through medicine for a long time, but they come as a gamish. They're not really target specific often. And recently, in the last 3 or 4 years, there's been a sort of a real expansion of the potential for phages for antimicrobial therapies, because you can actually you can either find an environment and isolate and amplify particular phages that work against particular bacteria, particular sites on each bacteria. So what the phage does is it's a viral particle, a virus against bacteria. It attaches to the bacteria, it injects its genetic material into the bacteria. And then it uses the bacterial machinery to recreate itself. It ruptures the cell. It goes to the next bacteria and does the same thing. And now there are 2 industry trials, which are in phase 2 trials to treat Pseudomonas. So one is Biomics and the other is Armada. And both, I think, are going to be reporting out soon. I think there's preliminary data in both that came out around the time of the North American CF meeting. But there's this real potential that some of these very challenging bacteria that we see in CF could be treated with one of these very unusual and novel mechanisms. There was also a very exciting study that was published in May of 2022 by Dr. Jerry Nick at National Jewish Health. It was a single patient who had Mycobacterium abscessus, and Mycobacterium abscessus is a very hard to treat bacteria. And this bacteria is coated with a waxy coat. It grows very slowly. It often is considered a contraindication to lung transplant. So I had a patient who had not been able to clear this bacteria, and they found a specific bacteriophage for his abscessus and gave the patient this over a long series of treatments, and he cleared the abscessus. And they had a lot of data to support how he cleared it. And now this is the premise for a new study they call PostStamp, which is this is for patients to get compassionate use phage against Mycobacterium abscessus in centers around the United States or CF centers. So the other things that it's important to note is that there are major funded non-industry studies that the CF Foundation supported that I think will change a lot of our care in CF. And they also help us understand this new era we're in CF. So the first series of studies are PROMISE, and you may have heard of these studies. They're showing how TRIKAFTA affects. First, it was in adults and young and adolescents, then in children, called PROMISE Peds. And as TRIKAFTA has been available to younger and younger patients, a study has been started that actually helps understand the various effects of these drugs that industry partners are not going to be interested in. So how do the drugs affect your bone? How do they affect your gut? How do they affect many aspects of your CF? The newest one is BEGIN, and that's a study to look at how these drugs affect the very young children with CF who will be getting TRIKAFTA. There's another large study called STOP 360, and this is an exacerbation study. It's already ongoing. And this is to find out if we still need to use aminoglycosides to treat exacerbations. Aminoglycosides have clear toxicity, and we've accepted that toxicity for the longest time. But as people are healthier, should we? And we need to know it's beneficial because it has clear effects on kidney, hearing, and your balance. We have a very large study on called Mayflowers, which is studying pregnancy in CF. This study is enrolled very well, and this is really understanding how TRIKAFTA is affecting pregnant women, women who use TRIKAFTA during pregnancy, and those who don't. There's a great new study that I think it's completed. We don't have the results yet, called Outreach, which is actually trying to understand how good home spirometry can be if it's coached or uncoached. And it's a very careful look at the role of home spirometry in research. And then the studies on the right side we call CHECK-SC, which is looking at population-wide in the US, how these modulators affect sweat chloride. PREDICT in patients are studies of the natural history of non-tuberculous mycobacterium infection. STOP Peds is a study that just completed and is planning for another study, showed that you could maybe avoid antibiotics in small children. That was the pilot. We don't know if that's true yet. So the next phase of study will be, they're in the planning phase right now. A very exciting study, which is starting shortly, which is the bionic pancreas. And this is a single unit that gives you both insulin and measures your glucose at the same time in one unit. And again, it's a very exciting study. I think it's rolling out to 15 centers around the United States. And the last I had mentioned, just as we harken back to the number of patients who are older with CF, certainly those older than 50, those over 40 should be getting a colonoscopy, a screening colonoscopy. So that age is not 50, it's 40 for CF. And this study is to study whether different aspects of colon cancer screening, how they compare to colonoscopy. And you may have seen these advertised on TV. One's called a FIT test. But these are ways to test the stool for either DNA of cancers or different markers of cancers. But this study will tell us whether those tests are valuable or not. But this is just a snapshot of just the amazing amount of research that's going on in CF to improve the lives of CF patients, from infancy all the way to the aging CF population. So with that, I'd like to stop. It's a lot. I talk fast. I apologize. And some of this is, fortunately, I think it's a little bit of rehash of the early talks, but I think it's a really exciting time in CF. I've often called our CF clinic going to clinic is more fun now than it ever has been. There are still patients who face serious challenges, though, and I don't want to understate that. Patients who are not on modulators they face some serious challenges of chronic lung infection, lung function not going down slowly, and fortunately, not many people in advanced lung disease, which is that red category that you saw by Dr. Mila. But with that, I'll take any questions, and I think I'm almost on a little over. But they'll tell me how many questions we can answer.
Way to go, Dr. Goss. The talking quickly certainly serves us well to get so much great content in. So we are so thankful, Dr. Goss, for you taking time to share with us in such an incredible presentation. We have a few questions, and I think we have time for them all. We'll catch up. We always do. It just seems to work like that. The timing gods are on our side here because we're doing so much good. All right, first question is, do you know if there's one specific part of the TRIKAFTA drug that has been identified as the one that is causing some of these mental issues? If so, is there a new drug on the horizon that would correct this?
That's a great question, and the issue about the mental health problems with Trikafta. I mean, I'm sort of convinced it happens in some patients because we've had the drug, we took the drug away, the symptoms got better, we put the drug back on, symptoms got worse. Although the recent data suggests that maybe that's not the case. There was a giant global analysis of safety data from the trial showed no increased anxiety or depression, but those are measured by adverse events. The newest combination, we don't know yet. So the newest combination of triple combination, which has completed enrollment by Vertex, that I think it completed in December, and I think we're waiting to hear the results. I don't know if that'll have less. We don't know of any specific component of the drug coming that may be associated with these effects on mental health and anxiety. There's I think Vertex, I think, feels that the drug does not cross the blood-brain barrier, which is usually what we think of drugs that have sort of CNS effects or effects on emotions. So, but so we don't know. The new combination, the once a day, the Q-day dosing drug, that's, again, we don't know if it's going to be better or the same or worse than current Trikafta. May have some of those benefits, but we'll only be able to tell with time. And I don't know if having done this study, I don't think there's a lot of questions about mental health in that. I think there is a very exciting study being done. I think it's Cincinnati, but I can't be sure, where they're looking at MRI in patients with Trikafta, and looking at different parts, what's called MRI, where you're actually looking at activation of certain centers of the brain when you're on the drug, when you're off the drug. So that will be interesting and hopefully informative. But great question. I wish I knew. We tend to sort of, I think the challenge will be to sort of unravel this now that we have this drug. But I think there will be answers with time, but I just don't know when. And there are newer modulators in the pipeline also. So.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dr. Goss. Yeah, big question for sure. Another question that came in is, what is the general timeline for trials or phases?
Yeah, the general timeline is probably for when you're just using a DNA package that's going to go in, it's not going to insert in the DNA, or the first I'd say is the mRNA. That timeline could be short. It could be as little as 5 years to success if they are successful. We do know mRNA therapy is mRNA packaged products are already in many of us, which is the COVID vaccines. So the mRNA, I think, has some real promise. How often it has to be regiven and things like that, how long it lasts, does it go to the right cells? But generally, that may be a time horizon, just because we know a lot about the safety of mRNA. If you're going to give a lipid nanoparticle with DNA that will not be integrated into the genome, that's probably still maybe in that 5 to 7 years. When you start to talk about gene editing and gene integration, that is probably 10 to 15 years. It should be noted that all the hemophilia, the sickle cell drugs are gene editing treatments, but there they have the unique ability to take out the cells of interest from the blood, edit them, and put them back in human. And so they don't have as big a challenge of targeting the tissue as we do in the lung.
Thank you so much. Okay, a few more questions. People are rolling them in now. Here we go. All right. Is there an estimate of when a cure might be available? I know that many years ago it was said there might be a shot in 15 to 20. Is that the same? Closer? Maybe 10 years? Hard to say, I'm sure.
Yeah, I think like a one-time cure. My guess is I'm hoping that 10, I don't plan to retire for 10 years, so I better be in the next 10 years. And I think that it's really hard to tell when breakthroughs come through. I was, taking care of CF patients before we had Trikafta, and I thought ivacaftor was just stunning. And then to have Trikafta, which was so amazing for so many patients, I never had thought it would happen. At that time, if you had asked me, I would say maybe another 10 or 15 years, we might have a small molecule, and it happened shortly after. So I think it's really hard to say, but I'm hoping that 10 years from now, we have a one-time cure for this disease, that patients will be treated once and that's it. Much like these sickle cell patients who will get one-time cures now available. So I think that is sort of my hope.
All right, we'll take it. Thank you, Dr. Goss. Next question. If stage 2 is successful for BioMX and or Armata, when do we expect they will finish stage 3?
So once you finish phase 2, usually companies are getting then either more funding or getting ready to roll out a phase 3 program with multi-center in conjunction with discussions with the FDA. So a phase 3 program from moving from phase 2 to phase 3 and completing phase 3 is probably about 4 years, 3 or 4 years. Just generally a chronic therapy usually has to be studied for 6 months, although that varies. And then they have open safety protocols that occur after the end of the phase 3 when patients roll into open label study drug. So it can be quite variable. Niche or they can have faster pathway if they're considered a breakthrough therapy, like Trikafta. The decision from when the trial was ended to when we actually got FDA approval and drug in patients was remarkably short. The drug seemed very safe. The drug was very effective. So it's really hard to say, but a phase 3 trial is often large and often requires hundreds of patients in many sites, and that takes usually 1.5 to 2 years to complete.
Thank you, Dr. Goss. Okay, 3 more questions. Has there been any recent studies of recurring sinus polyps in people with CF?
There is a lot more interest in sinus disease, and I'd have to say that recurrent polyps are common in CF. We do know that Trikafta has improved sinus disease quite dramatically, and there have been a number of case series showing dramatic changes in CF sinuses by CT scan. But polyps form with inflammation, and they're seen in asthma, and they're seen very prominently in CF, but there's now, I think, a big effort to improve our study of sinus disease in CF. So the CF Foundation, I know, has a number of funded research projects by otolaryngologists. And actually, one of our young clinical research scholars is a young faculty at UCLA, otolaryngologist. So it's the first time we've had actually otolaryngologists playing a major role in designing studies for CF patients with sinus disease. But there's some ongoing ones looking at small children in sinus disease. No one's specifically looking about recurrent polyps, but again, it's very commonly seen. And the hope is that if you decrease inflammation and improve CFTR correction, that inflammation goes away and the polyps will be less likely to occur.
Amazing. Thank you, Dr. Goss. Okay, and then I got a couple questions about this and from our staff as well, who were very excited. If you could just share a little bit more on the scope of the Bionic Pancreas program.
I love this program. So the Bionic Pancreas program has been supported by the NIH and the CF Foundation, and it's run out of Harvard. The coordinating center is JABE, which is a big endocrine coordinating center. And it's being moved forward as a device in type 1 diabetes, and the company who's moving forward has provided the device for the CF trial. And again, my guess is it will be enrolling in the next 3 to 4 months. I don't know where all the centers are. We wanted to be a center, and tier, we were not chosen as one. I think it's a really cool technology. Many patients now have in our clinic the Omnipod, which is a continuous glucose monitor and a separate insulin pump that talk to each other, talk to your phone. So that's made a lot easier, but to have it as one unit is really amazing. And I think it really simplifies a complex regimen that CF patients have to undergo. It's already complicated to have CF and then to add diabetes to it. So I know that early work that came out of Harvard suggests it was going to work really well. So we'll see what this next big study shows. It'll be ongoing for, I think, a couple of years. But in parallel, it'll be moving forward in type 1 diabetes too. So that's going to, we have CGMs or continuous glucose monitors from CGM work in type 1 diabetes. So
Amazing. And again, so cool to see just the overlap that occurs between, you know, the CF Foundation really looking at, okay, what else is going on over here that we can apply to what we're doing, and just incredible. All right, last question is Trikafta is expensive and creates challenge at times. Has there been any early thought about the future cost of, quote, gene therapy and access? Seems like this might warrant consideration before this becomes extent.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure the CF Foundation are trying to tackle this, and it'll be a real challenge. The gene therapy, the gene therapies for both sickle cell and some of these other drugs have been coming at just an exorbitant price. Now they argue that these are one-time therapies, so I mean, that's the hope for sickle cell. So I think it's our whole landscape of pricing for pharmaceutical drugs is very challenging. But the policy arm of the CF Foundation is already thinking about this as we move forward. Just because of certainly Trikafta is very expensive, and all these other diseases have followed that rule. Pulmonary hypertension, which is another disease my colleagues here at the University of Washington treat, they routinely have drugs that cost $300,000 to $400,000 a year, just like Trikafta. So those companies have lined up just like CF and have charged very, very high rates. And I'm not sure how to solve the problem. Some of this high cost actually drives the incentive to develop innovative drugs. And they do the US now allows us to buy some drugs from Canada. We don't know what the drug pricing for things like Trikafta are in Canada, but so who knows? But we'll see. I know people are thinking carefully about it because but we'd like to have that problem. We'd like to have a problem where we have a one-time cure that we can then start to negotiate and think about the policy aims about the cost of something that is such a miraculous treatment. So
that's right. And that's something that the CF Foundation continues to be really dedicated to. We, talks with staff and internally as well, just how we know that getting to a cure is the goal. And in addition to just getting to a cure is making sure it's accessible and being able to provide support for everyone with cystic fibrosis during that process and beyond, knowing that there's a whole array of things that will continue to impact. So there's one more question, but I'm going to see Dr. Goss if you're open to maybe responding in the chat just so we can move forward in the sake of time. Thank you so much for your incredible presentation this morning.
Yep. And sorry I went over. I apologize.
That's okay.
And went too fast.
Well, no, the fast was good. We got lots covered, and this is just the nature of the day. Everyone has so many good questions and so many good things to share. So I will pop that question in the chat in just a moment, but I get to turn things over now to another special guest joining us, and coming in next is Kay Pasquesi, who is a medical social worker with the Cystic Fibrosis Clinic, part of Kaiser Permanente's Northwest region. And today, Kay is going to share about finding support along your CF journey. As we've heard all morning, it really takes a whole group to support our incredible cystic fibrosis community. And we're just so grateful that Kay is here to share some more information about what can make all of this possible. So thank you so much for being here today. And you're up next, Kay.
Thank you, Erica. I am thrilled to be here. I appreciate being invited. This is our first time being part of this whole, I guess it's the first time you guys are doing this whole big group, but it's really fun to have people on here from all over the West Coast. So thank you to you all for tuning in. I'm Kay Pasquesi. I'm the social worker for the Kaiser Permanente Northwest Region Cystic Fibrosis Clinic. So I'm the social worker for the adult and the pediatric clinic. And I've been here for 17 and a half years. And it's so great to hear from Dr. Goss and Dr. Mila that they've been here even longer. So it makes me feel young. I appreciate that. And it's amazing the differences, right? When I started in 2006, things looked very different than they do now. And it's amazing. I really want to thank Jenny Anderson, who's from the Oregon CF Foundation chapter, who invited me to do it, and then who did these slides for me and is just an amazing person. She also is a parent of a child with CF. And she did all this during our ice storm when she completely lost power. So I am really impressed by her. So thank you very much for doing this. We could go to the next slide. Okay, so Jenny found this quote: your CF social worker seeks to support you and your CF journey by providing emotional support, care coordination, and resource assistance. So I hope you all know who your social worker is and your CF team. And I hope you talk with them. I hope you let them know kind of what you need and what's happening in your life. We want to partner with you. We know that you are the experts in living with CF. I know at least in our team, none of our providers, none of us live with CF daily. So you are the experts. We learn from you, and we just want to help partner with you and help make help as we can to make things a little easier, because we know that CF brings its own challenges and life can be challenging enough just as it is. So we have, okay, we're starting with the next resource. We have a ton of resources, so we're not going to be able to get to all of them today. Jenny's going to put a list that we have made up in the chat or somewhere in there so you can access that as well as these slides. What I would say is first talk to your CF social worker, because they're going to be aware of what resources are specific to your area and specific to your situation. Again, another great people to check in with are other people living with CF. So other CF parents, other patients, they're going to know probably even more than we do. So hopefully some of these will be helpful resources and maybe ones you haven't thought about before. So we're going to start with Compass, which is the CF Foundation's kind of informational hotline. It's a personalized service. It can help with all these things listed here. It helps with insurance coverage, recommending resources to pay for therapies and medications, legal information on schools. It's really great. Just a couple notes on them. I have tried to call on behalf of my patients, but they need your permission. So it's much better if you, having CF, you reach out to them. There's also a way to do this online, I think, to request information or ask for support for someone to call you, because they really can't talk to your team members much about your specific situation. And another thing is they're on East Coast time. So that's a little more challenging for us over here on the West Coast. But just so you know, they're really great and very helpful. Okay, next slide. So we tried to, there's a ton of resources, which is great news, but we tried to, Jenny tried to really organize this in a way that is easy to follow. So I hope we did a good job. So this first one is about medication assistance, and it's from all the different manufacturers that make these CF medications. Just a caveat, the medication copay assistance programs put out by the manufacturers cannot help people with government insurance. So if you have Medicare, you can't use these programs or Medicaid either. But so these are great, like Care Forward. So the AbbVie program and the Nestle Health Science, those are for like Creon and Zenpep. And they have copay cards for those medications, but then they also will send you free vitamins and free supplements. So they've been around for a long time, and hopefully people are using them. They're pretty great. Vertex Pharmaceuticals, I hope everybody is on this. It's the GPS program, Guidance and Patient Support. They will provide help, and I know things changed recently last year, but they'll check with your insurance and make sure it's still helpful. But my families, they get their copays down to $15 for this ridiculously expensive drug, Trikafta. So it's great. So please ask your social worker. They can sign you up. I think you could also sign yourself up. I have heard that the GPS patient support people are really interested in getting in touch with you and talking to you. So they'll be very persistent at calling you, and you can let them know like how much contact you want, but they're helpful. They try to be helpful. And then Genentech has the Pulmozyme copay program. They also have a patient assistance program for people that don't have insurance. So that's really great because I know for the Vertex GPS program, you have to have insurance. But Genentech has a patient assistance program for people without insurance. And I believe Viatris, I'm not sure how to say that, but with the Toby Podhaler, I think their patient assistance program probably also has that too. So it's great. We could go to the next slide. Okay, so also ask your CF person and ask at your center for the programs that they have. Every hospital has to have a patient assistance program. I know at Kaiser, we have a financial assistance program, which is pretty generous, I think. So they help you with copays for anything that happens within Kaiser, depending on your income. So it goes up to 400% of the poverty level. You would still get like 25% off your copays. So for one person, that's if you make less than $60,240 a year. For a family of four, if you make less than $124,800 for this year, for 2024. So it's pretty helpful. So ask your social worker and they can let you know what happens, what they have available in their own care center. So that's something. But then here are other amazing programs that help. So the Boomer Esiason Foundation, they do a lot of things. We'll be talking about them also later, but they do have a financial hardship assistance fund, and you can apply for that online. There's a part that your center needs to fill out, like to verify that person has CF and those kind of things, but you can work with your person for that. Claire's Place Foundation, that's Claire Wineland's foundation. They have a hospital stay grant. So I don't have a lot of people anymore, which is amazing, qualifying for this because you have to be in the hospital for 14 days. But this is a really helpful grant. It's helped some of my families in the past. They're wonderful. I really want to highlight the Healthwell Foundation. I'm hoping a lot of people are on this one. So they have two grants for CF. They have a cystic fibrosis treatment fund, which is listed. So that pays for your co-pays. And I hate to say it, but Kaiser's a little tricky and we don't play nicely with other pharmacy cards, but you can still, so they'll send you a pharmacy card that you can use to pay they bill them for their co-pays. But if you have Kaiser and they don't play with that, you can also upload your receipts and get reimbursed that way, which is excellent. So they have a copay treatment fund. It also will pay for your health insurance premiums. So you get to pick, either it'll pay for copays or it'll give you premium assistance, which is super helpful and very needed. But Healthwell also has a cystic fibrosis vitamins and supplements grant. So that is great too. So that you can get, supplements that, you can pick what supplements you want and you can pick the vitamins and they will, they won't send them to you, but our dietitians, and I think a lot of dietitians are using this other program, and I can't remember the name of it, but there's some of James, it's maybe CF assistance or something, and he'll send it to you and then bill Healthwell for you. So it's really easy because I've had people kind of agonize a bit about getting reimbursed, but these two programs, so the treatment fund and the vitamins and supplement fund for Healthwell, are back open. The vitamins and supplements didn't close, but the treatment fund was closed for a little while at the end of last year, and that was very stressful for a lot of people. So I'm happy to say they're back open. So that's one thing about these programs is the funding for them kind of comes and goes. So again, check with your social worker. They'll maybe have I don't want to assume that she's a female. They maybe have more information about what's open. You can go to the websites and look too and see. So they're rotating. And again, this is just, we highlighted some, but there's many other programs. I also want to tell you about the Patient Advocate Foundation. Their CF copay relief program is open now too, which is great. And they also help pay for premiums. So, that's hard to find those. So I wanted to highlight those. And then I wanted to brag a little bit about the Vivian Lee Foundation, which is local to us here in Oregon. They're out of Newberg, Oregon, which is a little further south of Portland. But they have some really good programs, family assistance programs. And I think if you call them, they'll be able to let you know what they have, what they're available to help with. So Ellie's Army, Cystic Dreams Fund, they have general financial grants for things outside of what your health insurance pays for. The Bunnell Foundation has a medical assistance program, so it's things that are specifically related to your medical things, but that your insurance doesn't fully cover. So like durable medical equipment, anything like that. So again, this is just a sampling, but hopefully, hopefully some of these will be helpful. Okay, next slide. All right, so now, so those are all kind of financial pieces. Now we're going to go into mental health. And I love that everybody acknowledged before that, and I love that the CF Foundation hires people specific to your care team that help deal with that. So your social worker, your mental health coordinator can all help. That we want to know how you're doing, like not just your physical part, but we want to know how you as an entire person, and that includes mental health and your emotional health, spirituality, everything. We want to know how you're doing, and we want to try to help you. So another great way, this is the CF Foundation has a Peer Connect program. So you can get involved. There's the website, and you can ask to be a mentor, or you can ask to connect with someone. So they connect you one-on-one, and you pick what topic you want it to be. So it can be on parenting, it can be on fertility, it can be on going to college. I think you have to be 16 and older to use this. It can be being an older adult with CF. Any of these things, if they match you up, and then you talk to that person. And I like this quote from Olivia: you decide how often you want to talk to each other, how long you want the relationship to ask. I've heard from a lot of my patients that it's been very helpful to have this. So that's a great program, again, put on by the amazing Cystic Fibrosis Foundation. Okay, next one, please. Next slide. Okay, so this is, it can be a parent of a young child. Yes, sorry. So it can be family members also. So maybe siblings with CF, but it can also be parents. So thanks for that. Sometimes I can see those questions in the chat as they pop up, and sometimes I can't answer them at the moment. So sorry about that. Okay, so so the CF Research Institute is amazing. I hope you all know about this. This is based near San Francisco, and it was started by parents of people with CF. So they provide amazing things. We're going to talk about that, but they also raise a bunch of money for the for research. So they're really quite amazing. So the first thing they offer is this 6 individual therapy sessions per year. So that's available for children, adults with CF, and their family members. So that is excellent. You can do that. I would also put in another plug here to talk with your social worker at our clinic. Myself and our mental health coordinator do offer counseling if people are interested. So, you know, we can do it here. We can help you find people in the community. So just check with them about what's available too. But CFRI then also has these monthly virtual support groups. So we'll be getting together with people from all over the country that join these. So they have one for caregivers, they have adults with CF, they have one for teens, they have a post-transplant group, they have adults with late diagnosis, they do a Spanish-speaking one, which is excellent, and they also have one for bereavement support. So they really are, it's an amazing, it's just a fun website to look at. We'll talk more because they also have health things, so we'll get to that. But there's additional support groups too that come. So Attain Health, which I hope people have heard about, that's based out of Montana, and it's parents, 2 parents that run it, of a person with CF. And they have all these different peer engagement groups. So that it's fun to look through that and see what you want. They have something on sobriety. They have something with spirituality. So there's a lot of great programs there. Oh, and then also, I know I'm telling you to talk to your social worker a lot, but I really want you to do that. Ask what support groups your clinic might have. So for us, This next month, February, which is coming up, this will be our 11th year of having a parent support group. So we've done that. We used to meet in person, and then of course with the pandemic, it's been virtual, which is good because then more people can join from the different areas. But yeah, we've been doing that for 11 years, and it's been, I love being a part of it. So it's, that's a great group. We have done different adult support groups from time to time. We don't have one running right now. And I'm actually also doing a group. It started when these kids were 6 and now they're turning 10. So we do that. So these are monthly groups that we have. So again, check with your clinic and your care center and ask them what kind of groups and supports they have for you. Okay, next slide. Okay, so this is, we wanted to put in a lot of this about exercise, because I know sometimes it's hard for people to afford gym memberships or anything like that. So there are a lot of options for that. Here are some of them. So the CFRI has virtual wellness classes and it's for people with CF and their families. So parents can join, siblings can join, and it's virtual. So it's Pilates, yoga, full body strength. They have mindfulness. It's actually taught by a doctor who has CF. So that's wonderful. Like, check on their website when those classes are going and when they start. They have physical therapist that does some classes. Attain Health also does strength and conditioning programs, and you get kind of a personal coach. So that's really wonderful. People may have heard about the Cystic Fibrosis Lifestyle Grant. Did people hear about that? So that was, that's been joined, and it's now called Miles for Cystic Fibrosis. These are Breathe Strong grants, and they're for exercise equipment, organized activities, and facility membership. So that is really helpful too. You can apply online for those. Piper's Angels does a lot of different things, but one of their programs too is an 8-week online meditation program, which is excellent for all of us for mental health coping tools. I hope you know about Rock CF. So that's Emily Schaller is an adult with CF, and she started this. It's based in Detroit, but they donate running shoes to people with CF, and it covers the registration fee up to $100 of running a race. So they're wonderful. Check into that. And again, our Vivian Lee Foundation has this Salty Life Activity Grant, and it for annually will give you $250 per CF patient to cover the cost of healthy activities. So it could be any classes, you know, it says sports, dance, it could be, you know, joining a community center that has a lot of different options. But yeah, those are some great programs. And again, I'm sure there's more. I don't know all of them, but we'll keep going. Next slide, please. Okay, hopefully you all know about the CF Legal Information Hotline. So this is run by Beth Suffian, who is a lawyer and an adult with CF. She's in her late 50s, and she runs this hotline. They also do a Social Security project. So this is the number for them. You can get in touch with them through that number or through the CF Foundation. So they help people with for their Social Security project. So for applying for Social Security, now people are facing maybe being removed from Social Security. So they can help you if you get any letters about that at all. Feel free to call them. They'll help you with that. And then their legal information hotline can just help with some of these other things. So disability, health insurance, employment, school, and education. And they're really a great resource, and they get back to you pretty quickly. Okay, next slide, please. All right, so here's some additional resources. So there are a bunch of college scholarships for people with CF, which is great. This is not at all a comprehensive list. We tried, but we wanted to make it readable, the slides. So here's some of them. So yes, AbbVie and Vertex have college scholarships, which is great. The Boomer Esiason Foundation has general academic scholarships. They have scholarships too for athletes. There's a lot of those with CF. So just check on those to see. The Bonnell Foundation has education scholarships. The Bowman brothers, I saw this through Rock CF. So they have a trade scholarships. I believe it's I forget how much it is, sorry. But that is for people going into the trades, right? We're not all going to college, so that is pretty excellent. The Scholarship of the Arts, that's with the Boomer Esiason Foundation, and that's a great scholarship. But I want to go down to the CF Roundtable. I hope people know that. We'll talk about it, but they also have a bunch of scholarships. So they have a $5,000 scholarship for someone studying the arts in college. So that's really great too. So the Roundtable also is this publication, and I think it's mostly, online now. They don't send it, but I used to love getting them. And it's the USA Cystic Fibrosis Adult thing. I don't know. They are amazing. One of the women who was the editor for this program was seen up at OHSU. She wasn't a Kaiser patient, but she helped them for like 29 years, and she passed away recently, I believe, at the age of 78. So she's amazing. She was amazing. But it's all adults with CF that write these articles. So it's about living with CF. They review all the research. They will have different topics. So that it comes out quarterly, and it'll have like a different topic for the whole newsletter. So they're amazing. And it's great to hear from, again, people living with us. A lot of these people that are on their board, Beth Suffian from the Legal Foundation is in this, but also a lot of them have transplants, and so they write about that and just their lives. It's great. I love that publication. So I hope you all get on. It's free too, which is the other thing. And then this TSA Cares is something that was found by one of our, maybe other people knew about it, but one of the moms from our clinic found this out. And this is really great resources that help people traveling with disabilities or medical conditions, can make it easier to go through TSA. So that's wonderful. Another thing, because things have changed so much, again, even since I started, and people are looking at, I'm probably going to live quite a long time, and I didn't make a plan, because when I was growing up, like, CF didn't look so great. So this Claire's Foundation also has this Work Proudly program, and it's to help people with CF and their caregivers. So that's what's wonderful too, to identify potential careers. It's supposed to help provide tools and equipment for remote work and training. They really are. That's an amazing thing. So yeah, there's a lot it's great that there's a lot of resources out there. So there's a lot of ways to get them, but I would say talk to your social worker. Again, they might be more in tune with what resources are available in your area and what works, what could you and your family could qualify for. But also CF Compass is a great resource. And then again, if you join any of these peer groups, all the people living with CF, the parents, the people with CF will have some really good ideas and great resources, and that is super helpful. Okay, next slide. Okay, so we wanted to remind you too, there's community conferences. So the CF Foundation has the BreatheCon, and that's coming up quick, actually. So February 9th through 10th. So please sign up for that if you want. That's the link to get into those. They have another one coming up in March, Hope in Action. So that's great. And then their Research Con is later on in April, April 30th to May 1st. So these are virtual for people with CF. They'll tell you which ones. So this first one, the BreatheCon, is adults with CF. So it's not for their family members too, but each one will say who is invited to come to those. Also, CFRI does a retreat for adults with CF. So I don't know if people know about that. Sometimes they still have it in person. Sometimes it's also online. So they have Mother's Day retreats. They have a lot of amazing things. So CFRI, I would recommend looking at their website. Okay, I think we just have one more slide, and then I can take questions. So yes, cystic fibrosis, as you all know, is a complex disease that benefits from a team approach for the best care. Please reach out to your CF care team for support. Yeah, we are here for you. like the whole reason your care team is there is to help try to make things a little easier for you. So please talk to us, talk to your CF social worker. If any of these things sounded like they would be helpful, you can ask them about it too. But I appreciate being asked to do this. This was fun. And I can take questions to the best of my ability.
Thank you, Kay. Thank you so much. So much amazing information. And so I know earlier people had asked about access to slides and things. So we're recording this entire presentation and we will upload it to the Washington, Alaska YouTube page. We will make sure to email out that YouTube link to everyone who registered for today's event. So then you can go through and check out the recording and then go to slides you're curious about and circle back to, because I know there's lots of great information on there and Kay was doing her best to get through so much of it in an efficient manner, which is hard to do. So just a couple quick questions. One is, and maybe this is hard to comment on for all the programs. I know you covered a wide range of those, but where does funding for these programs come from?
Oh, that's great. I think a lot of the smaller ones, like say Ellie's Army, the Vivian Lee Foundation, comes from donations from people. I don't know how much they get, if they get them from pharmaceutical companies or anything like that. Obviously, the ones from Genentech, Vertex, all that, they get it from the proceeds from selling their medications, I guess. So they, or the funding that they get from all that. CFRI, I know, gets a lot of financial, they, accept donations from people, but they also get money from the pharmaceutical companies too. So I hope that answers your question.
So helpful. And then Compass, of course, is funded through the foundation. So that comes from good old-fashioned CFF. Another question, is there help available to pay for health insurance?
Oh yeah, so that's what I said about the premium assistance. So those two, HealthWell and then the Patient Advocate Foundation, I think is what it was. Those are the only two I know of right now. There is the assistance fund, but that's closed already. That's another one that helps pay for premiums. These ones aren't specific to CF, but they're for any chronic, a bunch of different chronic conditions. So I know the assistance fund is closed right now. They were open last week. So I think I've heard that it goes really fast. So, but HealthWell and that. The other thing to check is, see if you qualify for, if you go to healthcare.gov, so anywhere in the United States, that's the website to go to apply for healthcare. And they will let you know if you qualify for Medicaid, which is state insurance. And that's all based on income. If you qualify for that, it really covers everything. So that's wonderful. They will let you know if you can get that maybe secondary to another insurance. And they will let you know on healthcare.gov. They will tell you if you qualify for any assistance towards your premium from the federal government. So that is a great way to do that too.
Perfect. Thank you, Kay. And for those listening in, some other folks have popped other resources in the chat that I think maybe they've used or connected with before. So if anyone else is curious about more amazing resources, if you scroll back in the chat a bit, there's some other great programs and stuff referenced there as well. And Jenny is kindly saying, if you want to email her at janderson@cff.org, she can help share some more of these resources and the slides from today. So thank you, Jenny. And thank you, Kay, so much for this incredible presentation. It is so helpful. We're really excited to know how much is available to help our cystic fibrosis community. And yes, with that, I get to turn it over to our last official speaker sharing about CF connected resources. We have a couple special guests who will close us out also, but I have the pleasure of turning things over now in this, which is now afternoon. Look how this morning has flown by. Oh my goodness. To Sharon McNamara, who is a research nurse manager with Seattle Children's Hospital. And you guys have heard so much about all the incredible research and trials and studies and all the good stuff going on. And so it's well timed to get to hear now from Sharon, who gets to talk about options to participate in research, which is so important as we continue to search for a cure. So with that, I will now hand things over to Sharon to share this afternoon. So thank you And Sharon, you are muted right now, but we will let you get off mute and then get things going in just a moment here. Right, Sharon is working to get off mute, so just be patient as we get to hear from her as well. Let me see if all right, I just clicked ask to unmute, Sharon. Did that pop anything up on your screen that you can click to unmute maybe? I'm trying to use my magical host skills here to no avail. What we might do, Sharon, is just circle back to you and give you a moment to play around with your settings and things. Perfect. You might have to do a log out, log back in scenario or a dial in from your phone for audio because it's not even letting me unmute you. So maybe there's just something with settings going on there, but we're going to just jump ahead just a bit then to hear from a couple members of our community. I'm going to turn my camera.
It looks like Sharon got
back
off
on.
mute.
Oh, Sharon, can we hear you now?
I got off mute. Now I just
Look
have
at
to
this.
open
All
my
we needed was
presentation again.
to say that we were switching and the universe knew. So Rick and Ev, we will come back to you in just a moment and let Sharon wrap things up. So thank you guys for being available to pop on. You knew I didn't even have to cue you. Just you were ready. Yes. Okay. So Sharon's going to get her slides ready and she will be able to share a bit. And Christy is also going to assist with a little video as well. So for those of you who are taking notes, if you're someone who is curious or interested or wanting to know more about research, this is a good time to take some notes. And again, this is also being recorded, so all of this will be referenced as well. Future, if you're going back to check on all this great information. And I do want to take time while Sharon's finishing getting her slides up to also just thank everyone who's tuned in today. It's been such a joy to have this incredible audience of people visiting us virtually from all over our area. And special thanks to all of our speakers who have been so generous of their time as well. So with that, all right, we have some slides coming up. Beautiful. And I will turn it over to you now, Sharon. Thank you so much.
Am I in presentation mode?
You are not yet in presentation mode, but
No.
I see your slides coming up now. That looks like they're presenting.
Great. All right. Thank you, everybody, for your patience. I'm going to talk about options to participate in research, and I have learned so much this morning from all the speakers. My name is Sharon McNamara. I'm the research nurse manager at Seattle Children's in cystic fibrosis and pulmonary research. I have put my email address there if any of you want to reach out to me afterwards. And I have had the great privilege of working in CF research since the investigations into inhaled tobramycin started. So I have seen quite the trajectory in research developments and improvement in care over many years. Today, I'm just going to give some really brief highlights about clinical research participation. I know some of you who have joined today have participated in research, thinking what should you consider about participating. And then I'm going to talk about the CF regional cooperatives, which are a new initiative from the CF Foundation and the CFF Clinical Trial Finder, so that you can find what research you're eligible for yourself. So in terms of clinical research highlights, very high level, remember that participating in clinical research is always voluntary. Whatever you decide, if you're offered the opportunity to participate in a study, will not affect your clinical care. And at a very high level, I think of two buckets of research. There's observational, population-based epidemiologic research, which really helps us to learn about a condition, whether it's CF or sickle cell or cancer. And these often involve specimen collection, surveys, medical history data collection, so pretty simple. And then the other bucket are interventional clinical trials, which are really aimed at helping us to develop a new treatment or perhaps some sort of new test or outcome measure, such as Dr. Mila was talking about earlier. Some things to think about what's involved in participating. We always have eligibility criteria, and the reason for these are to ensure that the participants are safe to take part in the study. And these criteria also ensure the quality of the study information that's being collected to make sure that we're able to answer the research question. There's always a consent process. For many of these studies, it will be a written consent, but sometimes there's a verbal consent process that happens. And this will involve a discussion with one of the researchers, a research coordinator, sometimes the principal investigator or a physician who's involved in the research. And you will have a document signed generally with a copy provided to you for reference. And finally, there's a commitment to a partnership with the study team. We're asking you to follow the study visit schedule and to complete the study procedures both in person and at home, and to communicate with the research team, especially if it's a study that's happening over time, to report your changes in health. And again, this goes back to ensuring your safety while you're participating. So how does the research team know what to do? Well, we have something called a study protocol. And this is a very large document that is developed over time. If it's a drug that's being developed, this will be submitted to the FDA and reviewed. And Dr. Goss talked about all the different committees that review studies, and they will be reviewing the study protocol. And what this document contains is a description of the scientific background that's motivating the study, what the study questions or the goals of the study are, very clearly defined so that we're not kind of wandering off track as the study started going, oh, maybe that would be interesting. Maybe that would be interesting. We want to keep really focused on what the goals of that particular study are. It defines the eligibility criteria. And then there's also a very detailed description of the study visit schedule and what procedures we're doing. And sometimes we're doing procedures that you may not encounter in clinical care that are particular to research themselves itself. There's a description of how the study is going to be monitored for safety, and there's descriptions of how the data is going to be maintained, how the integrity of that data will be maintained and reviewed for the data analysis. So in thinking about what the possible benefits of participation are, again, we think about some buckets. So there's often a benefit. I would say in all research, there's a benefit to a population or a community, contributing to the knowledge, in this case, about CF or about new treatments. But there may also be individual or personal benefit to participation. Participating in a clinical trial of a new drug may give you early access to new treatment, depending on what phase that study is in or what the age is of the participant. There's close monitoring of side effects and response to the study treatment by the research team at frequent study visits with labs being collected, ECGs being done, PFTs being done. And I would say that a benefit that some of you may be able to speak to is the relationship with the research team. So the research team kind of becomes another member of your care team when you participate in a research study. But there are also potential risks to be considered. These are going to vary depending on the type of study. What are the study procedures? Are they invasive? And depending on the age of the person participating, something may be more onerous than others. For young children, having blood draws is harder than for people with CF who are older. Some people just don't like to collect certain types of biospecimens. I've had kids say no to me when asked to collect something as simple, what I think of as simple as a urine sample. They'll be like, nope, not that study. And that goes back to, it's always your decision whether to participate or not. When thinking about new drugs, we have to think about the side effects. And again, what we know about those side effects is going to depend on the phase of the study. So if it's an early phase of study, we may not know as much about the side effects as in a later phase. Confidentiality is a consideration, although we are extremely committed to maintaining your privacy throughout the study. And you have to think about your time commitment. How does it fit with your life? What other things do you have going on? Maybe enrolling in a study at the beginning of the school year is not the best time as enrolling in early July when school is out. Maybe you're starting a new job. Maybe that's not the time to enroll in the study with a lot of study visits. So all those things to think about, and they're going to be individual, and they're things that you can talk about with both your care team and the research team. How can you afford to participate in a study? You're taking time off work, you're traveling, you're having meals not at home. So we do offer compensation for time and effort for study visits and procedures. And for studies through the Therapeutics Development Network, which I'll talk about in a few minutes, generally the current compensation is about $30 per hour for the study visit time. Study visits and procedures are covered by the research and are not charged to your insurance. And finally, we are generally reimbursing for travel from home, round trip mileage, meals, depending on the length of the study visit. If you have to stay in a hotel overnight, we have people who are enrolled in some of our studies who live in Eastern Washington, and we will arrange for a hotel for them overnight when they come for a study visit. And more recently, we're also reimbursing for childcare, if that is an expense that is associated with you participating in a study. So I'm going to move now to talking about this new CF Foundation initiative, which is called the CFF Regional Cooperatives. And just to put it in some context, on the left, you can see there's two boxes. There's the CF Therapeutics Development Network, or the TDN, which was established in 1998, funded by the CF Foundation, and there are currently 91 therapeutic development centers, or TDCs, in the United States. And Dr. Goss showed a really great map of where those are spread out across the country. There are also CF Care Centers, which are funded and accredited by the CF Foundation, and there are actually 288 accredited programs in the United States. So you can see there's far more care centers than there are TDN centers, and they do overlap. So for example, at Seattle Children's, we have a care center, and we also have a TDC center. But there are many people who are seen at care centers who do not have a research team readily available to them. And this idea of the regional cooperative is to kind of match those two different groups up so that we can be communicating and kind of become one to move CF research forward. Here's a map of the regional cooperatives. You can see the circles are not all equally sized, and that is based on the size of the population in those areas and also the number of centers. You can see in the upper northwest corner, the upper left corner is the Northwest region. There's a region in Northern California and Southern California. And we have launched meeting every 2 months together to look at what studies we're doing at each of our TDC sites and to reach out to the clinics, which are not part of the TDC, to invite them to refer people to us to participate in the studies that are open. And I know we actually in the Northwest have been very fortunate. We've kind of had this collaboration going on for a while. We've had referrals from Kaiser in Portland to a number of our studies, from Mary Bridge in Tacoma, from Madigan. We've had people, Alaska has their own TDC, but sometimes they've referred people down to us. And so we're kind of a little bit ahead of the curve there, and that's making our work easy in this new initiative. But why now? Why is this starting now? And I think you've heard a lot about this. Genetic therapies now are on the horizon, but there's also all those other trials going on to still look at anti-infectives, antimucolytics, the bionic pancreas, and we're also really, really focused on improving access to clinical trials for all people with CF, especially those from historically excluded racial and ethnic groups. So now I'm going to move on to show you a tool that you can use on your own, and it's called the CFF Clinical Trial Finder. It's on cff.org, and we are going to show this video, which was made by my colleague and friend, Heather Haythorne, who's at the University of Alabama. She is speaking initially to research teams, but all of this definitely will also be applicable to those of you, families and people with CF who want to know what your options are. So we can start the video. It's about 4 minutes.
This is such an exciting time in cystic fibrosis research. We have many clinical trials available, including those treating the underlying cause of CF, improving quality of life, antibiotics and anti-inflammatories, and treatments to improve nutrition and digestion. My name is Heather, and I am a research coordinator at the University of Alabama at Birmingham, and I want to introduce you to the Clinical Trial Finder, which is available on cff.org. The Trial Finder is an interactive tool that can help you identify available clinical trials and point you to the right contact person with just a few simple clicks. It doesn't matter if you're a member of a research team or a member of the care team, this tool is for you. The Trial Finder is an incredible resource that can help you connect interested patients with studies and locate recruiting centers. Meet me over on cff.org and let's take a look. Once on the Foundation's homepage, click on Research and Clinical Trials, and then scroll down to find the clinical trial. And voila, here you see the Clinical Trial Finder. Wow, a lot of studies listed here, but you can narrow down your search by using the search box or by applying filters such as study status, location, distance, age, FEV1, mutation, or therapeutic approach. So let's create a search. And remember, this form can be completed by a member of the care team, research team, or by the patient. For this example, I'm the RC at UAB, and we have a patient interested in nutritional studies, and we don't have a study to offer, but I'm going to search to see what may be available to him. I don't know the protocol or the drug name, so I'll leave that blank. I would like to know what's enrolling now. Patient lives in Birmingham, so I'll enter the zip code. He's willing to travel any distance, but I could make that change if needed. He's 35. He has an FEV1 75. He has one copy of F508del, and he's interested in nutritional studies. Here we go. And I will apply these filters. And my results include one study. So I can click into this study to learn more. Here you'll see a brief synopsis about this study, the eligibility criteria listed here, study design, additional information, study sites, those that are enrolling soon, or you can view all study sites and see who's enrolling now. I see Rainbow Babies is enrolling now. This may be something the patient's interested. I wonder how I can learn more. Learn more. So I'm going to enter in my name, my email, my phone number. I noticed Rainbow Babies is enrolling now, so I'll select that location and I'm going to type in my message. Again, here you can enter in anything you want, any information you want answered or information you would like to know. Certify that you're at least 18 years old, and you'll preview your message, and this will open in your email program. So here you see the emails populated for you. It's going to go to Rainbow Babies. It's got all the information listed here, and any specific questions, your message will appear here. All you have to do is send this email off, and then the contact at Rainbow Babies can answer your questions and get back to you. I hope you found this video helpful about the Clinical Trial Finder. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to Patty Burks at the Foundation. Thank you.
All right, back to you, Sharon. The video was great.
All right. So I hope that was a little empowering for all of you who are on and want to know more about what your options are. And just remember, you can, you're not limited to your region. You can go anywhere in the country to do one of these studies. So if you have friends or relatives who live across the country and there's a study there that you're interested in, go ahead and reach out to that research team there. I just have a couple examples of some studies that are being done here in the Northwest. And I just want to highlight that when you pull this up, you can see here at the bottom what the age range is, whether there's a mutation required, lung function, number of visits, and how long you're going to be participating. This is a gene therapy study that's being opened at University of Washington. I think Dr. Goss talked about several of these. The Mayflower study, enrolling women who are pregnant. This is a nice study because you don't have to go to the site to participate. You can participate remotely. So you could reach out to Oregon Health Sciences in the Northwest or the University of Washington about participating in that study. And finally, here's a study we're doing at Seattle Children's and Oregon Health Sciences and children who are less than 6 who are starting on Trikafta. I want to give a shout out to our 6 participants here who've been hanging out doing study visits and procedures with us. Last thing I want to talk about is a new position at the CF Foundation called the Clinical Trial Navigator. This is Katie Howe, who's a very experienced clinical research coordinator, and she is available if you are interested in something. You can reach out to her and she will help you with navigating that website, identifying sites for you to participate, and generally interfacing between anybody who's interested in participating and that clinical research team. So nice help from the CF Foundation. So to learn more, we've talked about these CF Foundation resources. There's a lot on the clinical research and clinical trials page, not only about gene therapy, but about those timelines that you saw. You can find them there. Somebody's already mentioned signing up for the virtual research con, which is coming up April 30th to May 1st. And this is for people with CF, families, friends, anybody who wants to learn about what's going on there. Talk with your CF clinic provider about your research options. And I would encourage you to dip your toe in the research pool. Think about enrolling in an easy single visit observational study as a way to learn about the research project and process. And that will make you ready to ride that clinical trial wave when the time is right for you, hopefully bringing us to those final cures for people with CF. And finally, our research commitment to you when you enroll in a research study. We commit to ensure your safety throughout the study. We commit to protect your privacy, and we commit to coordinate with your CF clinical care team. I'd like to say thanks and give my gratitude to all research participants, past, present, and future, and their families, and to the CF Foundation chapters who have sponsored this great educational session. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sharon. We're so grateful for all of that incredible information, and a bunch of links got popped in the chat while you were sharing. So for those who are listening and are more curious, there is a link to that clinical trial video. So if you do want to use that functionality and see how to do it again, that's available. Also, Christy just popped in the chat more information about ResearchCon, as well as a link to the clinical trial page. So amazing. We don't have any questions at this time. Sharon, you covered it all. You did an amazing job of getting it all out there, which is so fabulous. We're so grateful for you for taking time. And again, thank you to all of our speakers who joined us today and shared. We have a little bit more time today and just wanted to turn it over now to a couple of voices from our community who are going to share just a bit on their experience, their role, how they've gotten involved. And I know we have lots of great new faces or new names, I should say, on our list of participants. So just always helps to hear from others in the community about just what their journey was like getting involved. And so with that, I get to turn it over to Rick and Ev Carter, who are 2 grandparents of a cystic fibrosis little one who represent our Washington chapter, even though right now they're in Arizona getting some sunshine. So with that, Rick and Ev, please go ahead.
Hi, thanks for having us. Just so many great messages this morning. I think the word that comes to mind is hope. And given where our grandson Grayson is at in his journey with CF, we're so grateful. He hours after being born had to have a surgery. He had a bowel obstruction, and They inserted an ostomy bag, and then 8 months later had another surgery to reattach his bowels. And since then, boy, we're so grateful he hasn't been hospitalized for anything major. So we're grateful for all the foundation does, and we've been involved in a few different places. We're have a team called Super G for Great Strides. We're involved in Grampians, helping out with the golf tournament, the gala, doing what we can for the campaigns for Walgreens and Valvoline oil. And so that's kind of how we've been involved. And so I'll pass it on to my husband, Rick.
You know, when you stand over the hospital bed with your little grandson that is struggling for, we thought, life, and there's, I don't know how many, 7 surgeons and all kinds of nurses in the ICU. It really is grateful for folks that like you that are working so hard. And we see the passion in how you work. It's just not a job. Not, you know, for Erica and for Christy and the CFF Foundation and all you physicians and brilliant minds, we're so grateful for. So thank you. Thank you for hosting something like this, but just to continue to lean into it. So when we go ask our friends for money to step up and join us at events, it makes it easier because we can see there are results that are happening. We can tell them that, you know, your money works, it's working. And so a lot of things that we all give to, you're never sure. But this one we're positive on. So we just want to say thank you. And, you know, we really are working for that cure, to find that cure, because it means a lot to us and so many others that aren't yet born. We just had a call from a neighbor. They just had a child that was born, an acquaintance that was born and has CF. So, you know, it keeps on going. So thank you, thank you, thank you. Erica, Christy, way to go.
Oh, well, Rick and Ev, we're just so grateful for you guys and for what you do and just what you touched on, this idea of hope. And we heard about it a lot today, and just progress and still all the work ahead, and really what resources there are in the midst of all of that while we're waiting for that cure. And just hope that message has been made clear today for everyone tuning in. There's so many resources available. As staff people representing all of the chapters here today, we would love to get to know you if you're a new face, if you have questions or if you're unsure. There is so much community out there too. Rick and Ev are a great example of that, of folks who just sort of started dipping their toes in, and now they just can't say no. They want to do it all. So they are Great Strides people. If you're curious about Great Strides, they will be at our Great Strides Seattle Walk this year. They'd love to chat with you. They're volunteering at all sorts of other things. So we just appreciate everyone tuning in and taking time. I get to turn it over to my colleague, Christy, now, who is going to share just a little bit more about what we have going on, both locally and on a larger scale. So Christy, go for it.
Thank you, Erica, and big hands, round of applause for Erica emceeing us, keeping us on track and moving along. So appreciate all that you are doing. So I also just want to reiterate what Erica said. Thank you so much, Rick and Ev, and to each of our speakers today. It's been a wonderful morning into afternoon. I am sharing this slide. I just couldn't help myself. This is a great jumping off point, a great time for us to get together as a region. We have lots of other opportunities available, which a lot of our speakers already spoke on today. So we've got BreatheCon is an online conference for adults with CF, put on by adults with CF. So if you're in that category, I strongly encourage you to register. I think Erica might pop a couple links in the chat while I'm talking, so it's easy. Thank you. I already did probably. And then ResearchCon is coming up. That's also an online conference. Sharon spoke about that as well. I think Kay did too. We do have for family members, clinicians, opportunities to get together in person. So we've got some local chapter annual meetings coming up. Oregon's will be Friday, February 9th. Sacramento has one Thursday, February 22nd. Washington is Monday, March 4th, and San Francisco is Monday, March 11th. So I put our chapter emails at the bottom of this slide. Pretty easy to remember: Washington at cff.org, Oregon at cff.org, and Northern California, actually Northern-California at cff.org. So if you're interested in hearing more about those local chapter meetings, you want to go in person, reach out via email to them. We can get you the information. And then, because I love Great Strides, it's my baby. This is our casual 5K walk that anyone can participate in. It's a great opportunity to see the community in person. Most, if not all, are outdoors, so safe for people with CF to attend. Always consult with your care team. I'm not a doctor, but we can follow the protocols of being outdoors and keeping a safe distance. So again, just want to thank you all so much. We do have this community time. I know we've run a little bit over, but I am happy to stay on as long as people are interested. So we invite you to come off of camera. We are going to remember to hit stop record, because this is just a fun space for us to share. So feel free to come off camera, and I'll stop sharing my screen.